Taken by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner. Gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
William able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
And the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
So yeah, then the little guy goes and he picks up the other little guy, and he goes on this like really long walk. It's almost like he's like trying to carry him to like bed, like the way that like you carry your child. And he gets him all the way up to the top, and they get into the room, and he finally gets there, and he was like ready to do it, and then he stops and he turns around. Then the other one comes in, runs in. They're tackling, tumbling all over the ground. The ring pops off, and they both fall into the pit.
Dude.
Summary of Lord of the Rings.
Is that Willow?
I think that's Princess Bride.
I'm glad we started off this show with an inside joke that no one knows what we're talking
Welcome
about.
back to the Forever Mighty podcast, everybody. It's a Friday night show, rare Friday night show. For everybody wondering why Steven was doing a very poor breakdown of Lord of the Rings, it's because we were talking about my inability to recap movies at all.
That you've seen.
Yeah, that I've seen. I could watch a movie. 10 minutes later, you could ask me what happened, and it's not going to come out well. You're better off watching the trailer or just going to watch the movie yourself. It's not going to happen.
Like Canadian movies suck.
Yeah.
That's a country defect.
Yeah, like I just saw the new Thor the other day, and
Thor?
The new one.
Love it.
Oh, the new
one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's fun.
No, but I'm saying like I could have walked out of the theater and somebody going in could have been like, okay, just I lost my ticket. I'm not going in. Tell me how the movie went. It just
I don't know.
would not,
The Hammer.
would not go well.
Some chick.
So they're like Batman
Yeah,
is in
just
it,
go see
but
it.
he's not Batman.
Yeah, it's not a skill.
Just
I
go see the
possess.
beautiful people. Just go see the
Remembering
beautiful
movie quotes and recapping the movies. But I watch a lot of movies. I just I will not remember anything about them.
people. I can quote movies I haven't seen in like 30. Well, I'm 38. Yeah, like 30 years. I could quote movies.
30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like the same with TV shows too. Like
like Oliver and Company. Oh, I know so much from that.
I don't know why.
I can tell you the plot. I can tell you the twist.
Nothing.
That's not a good stuff.
Nothing gets retained. I have a couple friends who they quote TV show lines for days, and I can't do it. But anyway, we're not here to talk about this.
Remember when Disney made Billy Joel a big deal? That was weird.
Did they?
He doesn't know. All right.
You won't give me that one. Any movie reference, nothing's happening. All right.
So this is an NBA free agency recap based on Eddie's hat.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't bring this up last time. I'm not even a fan of the Raptors, but I felt like a token Canadian. I needed a Raptors hat, and I needed a new hat. So I walked into Lids, and of course, no Ducks hats. So it was yeah. Good luck finding anything here.
Shocker.
All Leafs hats, Blue Jays hats, and Raptors hats. So I had a choice, and I wasn't gonna buy a Leafs hat, and Blue Jays hat is not happening. So Raptors was what I settled on.
There you go.
Oh my gosh. And now, did you walk into Lids and that's literally all they had? They just had those
They probably
three
had to
Canadian
have like,
teams.
the Yankees.
Yeah. They
Or they have like the AHL Marlins. They had the Marlins on there.
Yeah, no. So
Or Marlies.
they've got Vegas hats, a couple Kraken hats, Montreal, Boston, Pittsburgh.
Did they have a Honey Badgers hat?
No.
Damn.
Yeah, no, that's not
Only
chance.
original 6 or expansion teams.
Yeah, exactly. Or the new one. So you're not getting anything. And then I was trying to get the Ducks Wild Wing jersey, the reverse retro.
Breakout, yeah.
I'm trying to find that forever, but I don't like the Fanatics jerseys, and that's all they have. Good luck finding it.
Unless they wanted to send us free ones, in which case we love them so much. They're so cool.
Yeah, it's a
My
great
favorite.
company. I mean, they really reach out to their customers and make them feel like part of the family, really.
Yeah, it's a great
So
experience buying
anyways,
anything from Fanatics.
extra large jersey. Not gonna put lamb on the back. That'd be weird.
No.
133 South. No,
You don't want to put Forever Mighty 1993 on the back?
here we go.
So the number has to be 93. So. All right, Ducks free agency. We ought to get to it. That's what we're here to talk about. We've spent the first 5 minutes talking about nothing. Lots of stuff to get to. We haven't. I don't think we've been on here since the Ducks didn't qualify specific RFAs, specifically Sonny Milano, which is the big talking point. So we're going to get into that. Whether we think it's a good decision, a bad decision, if it's going to derail the Ducks franchise for the next 10 years, we'll talk about that one.
Shut it down. Shut it down, man. It's done.
Poverty franchise.
Frankie Vetrano, Ryan Strome, new members of the Anaheim Ducks. 5 AHL signings or borderline kind of role player signings that got announced today as well. We'll look at who the Ducks could sign next. They're just under $10 million left to hit the cap floor, so they're going to have to do something, whether it's a trade, signing some of the players that are left. So we'll look at both of those, who they could get with the remaining names in free agency, what are some potential trade targets that some we haven't talked about before, some we have. And if we have time, we'll get to talk about the Ducks coaching hires. San Diego hired a new head coach. The Ducks hired an assistant coach and a new director of player development. If we get to it, we get to it. If not, we'll cover it another time. And development camp as well. But we have another show planned for that, so if we don't have time, we won't get to it. But first things up, RFAs. Lindstrom, qualifying offers sent. Vakanainen, Benoit, Ole Eriksson. Those are the 4 Ducks to receive qualifying offers. Jacob Larsson, not surprising. Jack Bedini, Lucas Elvenez, Roman Durney, not super surprising for those guys not to receive qualifying offers. The kind of surprising one, Sam Steele, but we speculated a little bit that he might not get one just because of how the performance has been going for him, that if he wasn't to receive one, it wouldn't be super surprising. And then the big one that got everybody up in arms was Sonny Milano not receiving a qualifying offer. That was the shocker, the headliner of the players that didn't receive one. Still hasn't signed, so that tells you a little bit about the consensus opinion on him, maybe outside of Anaheim as well, unless he's considering 30 different offers right now, and he's going to pick whatever one fits best for him. But
31,
yeah, 31 different offers. Well, no, not Philadelphia, because Tortorella, right? So it's 30.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So it's
that's so funny because I feel like
he'd probably fit there.
Tortorella allegedly liked him, so why wouldn't he go there, especially since that roster needs fucking offensive talent so bad?
Well, you could have signed a 115-point player, but instead you signed Nick Delorier to a 4-year deal, handed him a no-trade clause, and signed Justin Braun instead. So there's the path
cup
you
contenders.
could go. Yeah.
Like I said, cup contenders now.
Yeah, and looking at the Flyers, I forgot how bad they were last year. I knew they were bad. Obviously, they got the 5th overall pick, but just how bad and how far they missed the playoffs, 40 points out of the playoffs. That's and the sad thing for them too is that Goodrow wanted to play there. That was the number one choice, and they just either couldn't. I think they couldn't clear some of the cap, or they didn't like what the price was to move JVR's contract, and then they decided internally speculating whether it was worth it because of how bad they were last year.
Yeah, well, that was part of it. Is that they didn't want to. Chuck Fletcher just flat out came out and said he was he didn't want to pay what it was going to take. He thought it would be too expensive to move the necessary contracts, which is so stupid to me because it's one contract. They just have to move JVR's contract, and beyond that, they could have made it work. And it just feels like such a missed opportunity to me because if there was any team that could talk itself into signing for a long, expensive deal, a 30-year-old free agent, it's the team who the rest of their good players are also 30. I don't know. It feels like a waste to me.
Tortorella's pretty good with taking crap and making it work somehow. So, he kind of did that in Columbus and, made it work. So he'll do whatever he's going to do in Philly and, whether Goudreau's there or not. It just kind of, from a Ducks perspective, it would have been nice to add JVR over here, but I don't understand why Philly they lost Giroux, and then they really just didn't do anything besides sign Deleo, and it's all right, never mind. Yeah. That was the thing I was wondering, was Philly Goudreau's number 1 spot? Because I thought it was he was moving back for family, and I guess he's from Pennsylvania or that area.
He's from Jersey.
From Jersey.
He's from the part of Jersey that is right next to Philly.
Yeah, but he was apparently a big Flyers fan. So that was the number one spot for them. Like New Jersey was considered, but I guess their offer wasn't as good as Columbus. So I think between Columbus and New Jersey, like that decision, it came down to picking whoever was, gave them the most money at that point. But
yeah,
took less money to not play in Canada. I respect that.
Yeah. Have you seen some of the hate that the Flames
see the
fans
one?
are giving them?
Was it the news anchor in Calgary?
So stupid. Everybody was like,
I
he
loved
chose
it.
that one fucking date. The one dude on Twitter was like, he chose violence, and it's like literally the most fucking tame, milk ass comment.
Yeah.
I'll be here when I
those
get
who don't
back.
know-
Unless somebody pays me more money to go somewhere else. Yeah, dickhead. That's how.
I'll be here at 10 o'clock to give you the news. Unless someone from Columbus wants to pay me more money, then I'll just go there.
The most just bland toast.
I love it.
Oh, it's so.
That's as much comedy as you're going to get out of a Canadian, other than Jim Carrey.
That's true.
So I was wondering why the chat was so dead. Apparently we have subscriber-only chat on, and I don't know how to turn it off. So apologies for everybody who is trying to chat right now. Oh, I think I got it. I think we're good. We fixed it.
This channel is no longer in subscriber only mode.
We fixed it. All right, we're good. I think, at least.
I think there's got to be so many comments of how funny we were that first 5 minutes about.
I
the
was
Lord of the
I was
Rings.
sitting here watching it. I was like, wow.
Come on, guys, we're giving you gold, and there's no comments.
No, I was like, nobody really wants to talk tonight, and everybody's
Yeah, no one likes
love
this.
it. Yeah, we changed around a lot of settings. We added in emotes and a bunch of different stuff, and apparently I turned on subscriber only chat while I was messing with it last night. So apologies anybody who wanted to. Somebody says finally. They wanted to comment on our jokes, but it's
sure, it's all going to be awesome comments.
yeah. But okay,
Wanted to heckle us in the chat.
Sonny Milano, what are you guys' thoughts on him not receiving a qualifying offer? Because everybody has been up in arms about him not coming back. Why not? The Ducks have so much cap space. He was one of the better offensive players last year. The chemistry with Zegras, you can go on and on and on. We loved him last year, right? Like he was part of the most fun goal in the NHL. Great player. What are your guys' thoughts on him going?
Well, my thing is I'm going to kind of agree with something. I mean, not to the extent of burn it down or Verbeek is just the worst GM of all time, but it doesn't make any sense to me. Even after we get rid of him and after everyone we've already signed, we still don't have enough roster players. We still don't have a whole lot of familiar faces, and on top of that, we still need 10 million more just to reach the damn floor. I just can't imagine that he was going to take up so much money for so long a period of time and be so detrimental to this team that you couldn't qualify him for something. And if anything, just to make Zegras happy with his buddy, I mean, they made the highlight reel play of, last season. You'd think, hey, maybe there's something a little bit more there. They work well together. Throw someone in there to kind of add it. I don't really see a whole lot of logic. I'm not, re-signing him or qualifying him for, at least a little bit of money. Yeah. For a little bit of term. I mean, I just don't think the guy was asking for $5 million for 5 years. That's what we gave Strome, and I doubt you're going to get anywhere close to the production or excitement value out of that.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Ed?
Yeah, I see the disappointment a bit on not bringing him back, and there is some logic behind the fact that the Ducks do have as much cap space as they have. Why not bring this guy back? Like, it'd be interesting to see what he eventually signs for. I can't imagine it's anything over $3 million. It'd be surprising to see him get that. When you see what some of the other guys who've had one good year and what they've signed for. I think a guy like Evan Rodriguez would probably set the market for Sonny Milano. A very similar situation, had a good year on a good team, played up in the lineup. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he goes. But you know what? It's a disappointing decision because he did have chemistry with Z. The Ducks are screaming for top 6 wingers, guys who have that potential. The one thing I will say, it's not the end of the world, right? Like, it is not going to set the franchise back. They've essentially replaced him by bringing in Frankie Vetrano. There are polar opposites in the sense of what they bring, where Milano was kind of a great two-way threat, playmaking option, good shot assist player, and then you got Vetrano, who is kind of the shot first guy, good transition forward. So they're going to bring, I think, the same impact to the roster. And maybe it was just time for a change again for Pat Verbeek. He saw the Milano at his best here and looked at what was out there and opted to go out and sign somebody else. So, I don't think it's the worst decision in the world when you brought in a player in Vetrano who probably would have commanded about the same amount of money and is going to give you the same impact.
The only other thing I could think of just real quick is just what if he had his eye set on a free agent and it didn't pan out? And then it kind of looks like crap. All right, well, we didn't get the guy, and this is why we didn't do that. Now we're kind of stuck with it. That sort of decision. That's the only thing I can maybe think of is like he had his eye on more than what he actually was able to sign. So that's the only out I could possibly give him is like, okay, that's what he was aiming for, and he just kind of missed on it. But who knows?
Yeah, I don't think that's unfair, to be honest. Like, I think to be honest, I think there's an interesting amount of risk associated with this, simply because you knew what the floor with Sonny Milano was, right? Everybody knows his numbers fell off in the second half, but he was still able to be a semi-productive. He wasn't a detriment to the team, right? Like, he wasn't getting finishes or bounces or things like that, but he wasn't playing bad.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to be said for the bring him back on a short-term deal, even if it's just a qualifying offer. I think I looked it up, and I was surprised his qualifying offer was only like 1.8. So nothing crazy. And obviously, like everybody said, we had the cap space. And, you can play him with Zegras. Like, you already have proof of concept of that, right? And so I do think there's an interesting amount of risk. I think the asset management part of it
is bingo right there.
Yeah, right.
Valid, but
Drink.
overblown. Right? Like we talked about this the night before it all happened, hilariously, with Kubalik and Dylan Strome. And, we just said, like, they left money on the table. And I think that is still absolutely true for Anaheim. But I do think it's Verbeek's first real opportunity to have an actual impact on who's on the team. And I don't think Sonny Milano is the quality of talent, or at least hasn't, produced at the quality of talent level where you're like, we have to make sure that we lock this guy up, right? Like, I think you can more than fairly say better players were also not qualified.
Yeah, around the league. There was a lot of surprising names. And, Chicago is Chicago with the direction that they're going in. So, in a sense, it makes a little bit of sense on why they decided not to qualify Strome and Kubalik and not go down that process and just let them walk. But I think when you look at the quality free agents available, the players the Ducks got, like, they more than replaced Sonny Milano. And if you're looking for, a certain profile type of player, if Milano doesn't fit that, he's not a guy you lock up long term. If he doesn't fit,
right,
the way Pat Verbeek wants to build this team and the type of player he wants, and we've heard him speak about it, compete level and everything like that, some size, needs some shooters on the team, then you let him walk, right? You don't sign him just to keep him around because he had a good year. You go out and you do what he's done. You go out and get Frank Vatrano, who essentially slots in the same spot in the lineup that Sonny Milano did, and maybe he fits more of what you're trying to build. Because when you look at kind of their skill sets, like I said, they are a little bit polar opposites, where Milano was the guy who, was the high danger assist player, was the playmaker, the play driver on that wing on the line. Then you've got Vatrano, who again is a bit more of the transition guy, will pick the puck up deep, carry it up into the zone, and is the shot first option on that line. His shots per 60 last year were well above a lot of players on the Ducks if you compare, especially Milano, who's kind of in the negative side of that. So I think you've replaced him there, and then you bring in a guy like Ryan Strome, who maybe does a little bit of what Milano did when you look at that playmaking sides of things and what he brings to the game. So I think if you have that in mind, and from what we've heard from Verbeek, is that he wanted these guys right off the bat, and these were two of the guys he identified. Whether he's going to say that or not, if these guys landed in his lap or these were his second, third,
love
or
these
fourth
guys
choice.
For all my life.
Yeah. But there is something to be said that if these were the guys he was targeting, and you're going to add them to your top 6 or into your top 9, and Milano doesn't fit what you need, then he's expendable at that point. And the same can be said for Sam Steele. And the production isn't quite as there, so it makes a little bit more sense to let Sam Steele walk. But I'm fine with it. Like, listen, it's not the end of the world. I get why everybody's a little bit upset because of the chemistry you had with Z, and because you have so much cap space. Why not just spend it on a guy and bring him back and see what you have there? But if he's not part of the plans, then why lock a guy down that you're not happy keeping around?
I think that's exactly right. Like, I think it's more than fair to, like, again, in the just super analytical, cold computer brain way, like, I get why the asset management thing, I do think that is overblown, because this isn't someone who was going to fetch a first or a second round pick at any point.
Yeah.
And there is, again, something to be said, like you said, of him just being like, or Verbeek just being like, Milano doesn't fit where we're going. And based on the two players he signed, I think it's fair to say, that he's hoping probably by the third year of that Strome deal that maybe we're a little bit closer to a wild card spot on a regular basis. So, and if Milano, you don't expect him to be part of that group moving forward, then I don't think it's a big deal.
I can't imagine with $10 million just at the floor, not even talking about hitting close to halfway through the cap or the rest of the way through the cap, why you couldn't get that guy to go for, $2 million for a year or 2 years. I just don't see how there's any negative aspect to it. Once again, they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it. It's not my money. But I mean,
I think that's the part of it, right? To me, is more than anything, he takes up a roster spot. You can't not put him in your top 9.
I don't think we're hurting for roster spots at this point. Like, I mean, we need people to actually fill those roster spots.
I don't disagree, but
the only other thing is that if they felt that they didn't want him necessarily playing with Zegras because they're too similar as far as playmaking ability, and they wanted someone who's going to be a finisher, and that's why they picked up the free agents they did. That's fine, but I still think he could slot in as quite honestly in Silverberg's spot. We don't even know where Silverberg is at this point. Obviously, maybe they know a little bit better, but it didn't seem like such a stretch. It was such a detriment that you needed to go that route, and you couldn't give him another year. And then, maybe flip him. If you can't, who cares? You're right at the next spot next year. And, I mean, this team's not going to really go anywhere, and he's not going to ruin your draft pick chances. So I don't see the logic behind it unless, like I said, the only other thing I can think of is just that they had their eye on somebody else to bring in, and then that was going to fill out the roster spot, and they missed. And so they got 2 guys. But once again, I feel like Milano could have fit in there just fine.
Yeah, like there's a place to fit him, right? Where we're talking about right now that the Ducks could use another forward in free agency to fill a roster spot in case somebody gets hurt, so you're not forcing somebody out from San Diego. So there's definitely a spot for him. But my whole thing with this is if you're Pat Verbeek and you don't think this player fits your plans, you can go out and get somebody like he has done that does fit what you want to do in free agency and not have a guy that personally, I guess, we don't know, that you don't really want around or doesn't fit what you're trying to build. And, DB Lowry mentioned in the chat too, like if you think Perreault and Tracy are ready as well, do you need him? Do you want to lock him down long term? Can you bring a guy in for a year instead as like a make way for when these guys are ready, or potentially they're ready in the middle part of the season, then you could bring them up. We don't know the details of the contract. We'll see what he signs, but I would imagine he probably would have locked down a deal around 3 to 4 years. The term, it doesn't really matter again with the Ducks cap space, but why lock a guy down that long that you're going to have to move inevitably if you don't want him on the roster? You've now got that option that, listen, we're going to let him walk. It's not working out. You're going to go and you can find another team. We're going to get guys that we want on the roster.
Maybe that's the other thing. Maybe he wants long term. Maybe he wanted 3 years. No. We're not doing that. We'll give you a year, and they couldn't reach an agreement. All right, well, that's pretty much it. So maybe that's it.
Yeah, I mean, completely lost my train of thought right there. I hate when that happens. I'm so annoyed.
It's all right. Let's catch the next one.
Yeah. So, anyways, sorry.
Sorry, there's a bold choice where the sports.
Max Jones. No, dude, there's an outside shot. Max Jones is on the 4th line next year.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to the surprising depth of position, right? Because I think, Lundestrom and Grant are probably your 3 and your 4 centers, or Carrick. And if that's the case, now you've already got Henrique on the wing. You've still got Comtois. You've still got Jones. You've got anybody that you might still want to bring in or bring up. I just think you went out and you now have 4 of your top 6 locked in, you would imagine. And at that point, you already have guys on your roster already that are going to have to get slid down. So, I don't know.
I like slud. Let's call it slud. Slud in.
Slide it down.
Slud in.
We're going to slide it in down
SLUDE. Slud.
the organization.
I mean, that's a good point with Mac Jones kind of coming in because we didn't really see him at all last year. I mean, he's going to take up a wing spot there as well. Like you said, adding maybe a Perreault in there. And all of a sudden, you're starting to kind of fill that spot out. And then, like I said, they brought in the other guys, and then maybe they had their eye on somebody else, and they were like, okay, listen, we're going to have these guys we think are going to make that next step moving forward with the organization. We can bring someone in, and this is going to be the odd man out. And, maybe provide some sort of competition or some depth, but maybe that's not necessarily really the right thing for Milano, and especially if Milano is looking to definitely have a roster spot and definitely kind of move his career forward, or at least lock in some longevity with whatever contract he has, then maybe they just weren't seeing eye to eye on it.
Yeah, for sure.
No, yeah, I can see it. I mean, we look at the guys that they brought in. Frankie Vetrano signs 3 by $3.65 million. Again, probably what you would have seen from a guy like Milano if he was to stick around term and average annual value. Pretty decent deal, I think, for what he's produced. He had a good season with the Rangers, was pretty good at times with the Florida Panthers when he was there, kind of up and down the lineup. But he is a guy that I think you know what you're going to get with him, which does help, I think, the decision. If we're going to strictly compare them together between Milano and Vetrano, is that Vetrano's going to be that consistent kind of 15 to 20 goal scoring threat, a guy who's going to put up 25 to 35 points. He's going to be a key transition player. He's going to shoot the puck a lot, which there aren't too many guys on the Ducks roster who are shot first players. So, for what you're getting for him for 3 years, he's 28, so you're going to have him until he's 31. It's a pretty good time to have a player like this and potentially to give him a shot at playing with some top players. And again, there's that familiarity with Strome. They played at times together with the Rangers. And, if you're the Ducks right now, looks like maybe a good option if you could play him with Trevor Zegras and he becomes the shooter on that line for him to have a really good year. Whether he's going to stick there or not, we'll see. But right now, when you look at, okay, who's the best guy to play with them in the Ducks roster right now outside of Troy Terry that could shoot the puck, it might be Vetrano. It might be, and we'll see where he plays. But I think he is a good fit for the Ducks to play in their top 9 and a better consistent threat than we've had over the last couple of years.
Jay, how would you feel if the first line from left wing to right wing was Henrique, Zegras, Vetrano? The second line was Comtois, Strome, Terry.
I think that spreads out our offense over 2 lines. I'd much rather see Comtois on the top line, at least to start. See if he can't do something there with Zegras, because Comtois is also a shoot-first guy, but also scores from in tight. And that's where a lot of his success was, not last year, but the year before that, trying to see if maybe that can happen. You have Vetrano is really good, I guess, from his fancy stats about, being able to get rebounds and being able to be in there. So if you have that top line there, I thought that would be probably a little bit better. Henrique would be great with Terry. They're both really smart, and they can think about how they're going to, make plays happen. And then so that's where I would probably say. But, if you want to, I'm sure lines are going to get juggled around because, unfortunately, I think even with both of those lines, they're somewhat containable against, top teams. So that's the only tweak I might make, and then just see if Comtois can do anything. If he can't do anything, and it's the same as it was last year, that's when I think you seriously start to see if he just needs a new place to play. Yeah, which is kind of sad, but we'll just see.
We are heading into that final year of Comtois' contract. That if things don't pan out, maybe you move him at the deadline. Shattenkirk seems to be the likely option to move at the deadline because he's in the final year of the contract. With Comtois, you don't have to because you do have that RFA control. But I don't know yet for Comtois in the sense of him playing in the top 6. I'm not sold. I do like some of the other options, like you'd mentioned McTavish playing in between Henrique and Terry. I think that's a really good way if you're going to have him at center to insulate him into the lineup. You've got another guy who does play center in Henrique to have to, maybe he comes in and takes some of the faceoffs, and then McTavish plays down the middle sometimes. And then you've got a playmaker like Terry, where then McTavish becomes kind of the main shooting option on that line. I think that's really good for him. And then with Z, I think pairing him with guys who are good in transition is probably the smartest move, because he's going to be a guy who has his the puck on his stick for most of the time. He's going to be the guy who drops back between the defenders, picks the puck up, and carries it up the ice. And to have guys that know how that works and have been in situations where they excel in those types of situations, like Frank Vatrano, I think would be good. Whoever plays on that top line, I think, like what you said with Comtois, if we're talking about generating rebound chances and having a guy who can go to the net, Comtois shown he can do that. I think Max Jones could be a shout to be a guy like that and have a physical role on that line. I'd be interested to see who it could be. I like those two guys as options, but we're still not done in free agency here. The Ducks could sign a few more guys, and we might see some options open up there. But I do like the potential fit. If I had to pick a center for Frankie Vetrano to play with, it would probably be Trevor Zegras at this point, unless Henrique was going to move to the middle, because I could see them working well together. But Trevor Zegras would probably be my pick for him right now.
It would be fun to see him on a third line with McTavish.
Yeah.
Like him, McTavish, and Lundestrom.
Shifted Lindy to the wing then at that point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, moving to the left wing.
I can't wait to see what Max Jones is going to do this year, because I still have really high hopes for what he can do, as far as A, being a pass, B, just being that net front presence that we don't have that nastiness anymore now that Getzlaf is gone. So you got to kind of start looking around. Well, where are we going to get that from? And I think Max Jones can do it. And so I'm kind of interested to see if you get, just that Matthew Tkachuk light type player in there, and see if that can really, because he got kind of gypped out of last year with a pectoral injury.
Yeah.
I think if you're hoping, right, you hope that he's, I guess, this just because the skill level with Matthew Tkachuk is so high, obviously you kind of hope he ends up kind of like Tom Wilson as far as style of play and maybe production. I know Tom Wilson's goal scoring didn't pick up, I think, until his mid-20s, because I think he's almost 30 now. So I think he could still be along the lines of where he moves into the top half of the lineup and he gets closer to 15, 20 goals. But I have a hard.
It's a lot easier if you're playing with Ovechkin too.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, but I mean, if he's on a line.
Who's on a line with Zegras though, right?
Zegras and Terry. I don't think that's
Zegras is now Ovechkin, has he?
No.
Yeah.
I think Ovi gives Tom Wilson space to get in better positions, right? And
Ovechkin has a gravity. Yeah,
he's pulling players over to him. You're open on the ice. But when we're talking about if you want a guy to go to the net and have a good shot on him, I think Zegras playing with Max Jones, that does open up space, because people are eventually, they already do now, are going to gravitate towards Trevor Zegras to try and stop him. So if you're Max Jones, they kind of do have the same effect on the play of picking up maybe two defenders and taking guys out of position, and then you have a guy like Tom Wilson or Max Jones who gets open at that point. You look at, I like the comparison, because you look at the first few years of Tom Wilson's career: 3 goals, 10 points in his first year, 4 goals, 17 points in the second, 7 goals in back-to-back 82-game seasons, and 23 points and 29 points, and then bam, 14 goals, 22, 21, 13 and 47 games, then 24 last year. Takes these guys sometimes a little
what
bit
age
longer
is
to
his
figure it
first 20-goal season?
At
what age is he? 25, 26?
28 now. So 24, 25 is his first 20-goal season. His first double-digit goal season was the season before that, so 23, 24. Max Jones is 24 right now. Missed a whole season of development last year. I think it's
many are saying he's the next chain, right, as far as missing time and coming back strong. So.
Yeah, exactly. I do think the criticism, and maybe not the criticism, but Max Jones is getting lumped in with a lot of other players here, and we saw him play 2 games last year and played 46 the year before that. To say you're excited about Max Jones, and people look at you and say, well, why? Well, because he was a former first-round pick. He's a bigger guy. He's can take a little bit longer development. We just showed a guy who just plays a similar style of game in Tom Wilson that took a little bit longer to get there. why not be excited about this guy? He's shown flashes that he can be a capable NHL player, that he can get to the dirty areas, that he's got a good shot on him. He's quick. He's got that speed that he can keep up and play with a player like Trevor Zegras. Guy's been hit in the gym all offseason last year. Like, for a guy that was already in as good a shape as he was before, he's been basically only in the gym or doing things for Ducks social media over the last year. So I'm excited to see him. Like, of all the players, just because, again, you only saw him for 2 games, and the games he played before that and the couple seasons he had under his belt, we liked what we saw from him, right? It was raw. There's still some things he needed to work on, but you saw that compete level. I think he's going to really thrive.
He has a disposition that this team needs.
Yeah, he brings something to the lineup. There's an element that they don't, absolutely. That nobody else really does. Comtois is a big guy. He's been playing with the edge, but there's from what we saw, and it's been a while, from Max Jones, he just brings something that they don't have. So yeah, I'm fine saying that he's one of I'm excited to see him more than anybody probably other than McTavish next year, of the guys that we project to be on this lineup, just because anything could happen. Like, he's not going to pop off for 30 goals. That's not going to happen. But he could turn into a really complimentary player, a really good complimentary player for the Ducks here. It might take him some time to get things going after missing the full season, but I'm really excited to kind of see how his development goes, because he was in that bunch, right, of Lindstrom and Steele and Terry, where we're like, okay, we're waiting for these guys to take steps forward. Okay, well, now we've lost one. Lindstrom is getting there. Terry's jumped to the stratosphere. So now Max Jones is kind of like the last guy here, where we're like, okay, what is he and what can he be in this roster? And so, yeah, I'm excited to see what that's going to turn out to be.
My prediction is he's going to make everyone forget about Sonny Milano pretty quick. If he stays healthy, he's going to become one of those players that fans are really going to enjoy, because the small, sadly, it's a small sample size that we've had over the last 2 seasons. I absolutely love what he's going to bring to the Ducks, and it's something, like you said, it's just something that most players do not have, and that's something we've had an agitator kind of at that level since Corey Perry. Corey Perry is a good agitator, so as far as agitating level, I think he can absolutely do what we need or want to see too.
Yeah, I think Max Jones has the face for it, and it sounds silly, but if you I don't think Max Comtois is a punchable face, right? You see a picture of Matthew Tkachuk, and you're like, oh, everyone hates him. It's immediate. You just know that everybody hates him, and I think Max Jones is the same way. He just brings it out of guys. Comtois is feisty. He'll mix it up with people, but he doesn't get to them deep down in the pits where guys like Max Jones or Tom Wilson or Matthew Tkachuk or Perry, right, used to bring it out of guys. And I think that's the part of it that's going to be really cool. And, he really is a guy that if he develops into a third forward on a top 3 line, that's perfect. That's totally fine. You know what I mean? I know he's a former first overall. He's a former first round pick. I think he ended up in the mid-20s. So I know there's probably a little bit more expectation for him. But if he's a top 9 forward, that's still a win. That gives them somebody they brought in internally. That gives them, maybe he's a Barclay Gaudreau, right? Or Darren Helm or these kinds of guys that we see have impacts as teams go on these runs and they have those depth players step out, because he does have, enough skill to make plays here and there.
Yeah, the guys that every team looks for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and out of our podcast, easily Steven is like your Matthew Tkachuk, the most punchable face. You just want, there it is, that smile. Oh my God. Love you.
Okay, well, we were supposed to talk about Frankie Vetrano and what he could bring. We got down a rabbit hole talking about Max Jones and gushing about him for the last 10 minutes. Quick thoughts on Vetrano before we move on to Strome. What do you like? Do you think he's going to have a noticeable impact for this team? Do you like what he brings? Do you like the signing?
If he plays with Zegras, it's impossible for him and his skill set not to be noticed. He'll finish better than Milano did, even though Milano had a great time with him. I think he's just got that other elite level shot. And if you got somebody setting you up for it, then he's going to be in good shape. So. Yeah, I can't imagine he does anything less than maybe 20 goals. I don't know if he's going to hit stratosphere numbers, but it also depends. If he doesn't play with Zegras and he starts playing on other lines, I think his production is maybe a little bit less than 20 goals. But I think the main reason he's brought in is he's a finisher, and we don't have many of those other than, maybe Zegras at some capacity, but Troy Terry is the other one. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, his comments and things we've seen as when he moved on from Florida to New York is, he got lost in the lineup in Florida. They just had a lot of guys. Like, that's not really his fault. It just becomes a numbers game at that point. And I'm sure bringing in Sam Bennett was pretty much the nail in his coffin. I think Jay's dead on. Like, he's going to be noticeable immediately. With the speed at which he plays, I think we should expect him to be, aggressive on the forecheck, really trying to get in there and create those kinds of turnovers, use his speed and use that shot. And, I think he's a guy that they're hoping there's a little bit more for him to give, and he can get to 20, 25 goals, for the next 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if he does, then that's a great fit, because Anaheim's got playmakers. They need finishers.
Yep. Always a middle of the lineup guy. So, there's potential there, right? Playing him with a setup man like Zegras. So.
Well, yeah. And worst comes to worst, if he's on a third line with Max Jones and Isaac Lundestrom, I don't think you're upset about that.
Because he's shown he can do that role.
That's a perfectly fine spot for him to be. I don't think you're feeling like you caught, I don't think you took an L with that, right? Because I expect, Silverberg to be on the fourth line.
Yeah, if he's playing at all. Health concerns up in the air. All right, big signing. Ryan Strome, 5x5. Well under what he was projected to get. Now, I know Evolving Hockey projected him at like 7x7 or something. Or I think if he signed a 5-year deal, it's going to be 5x7.2 is what they projected. Listen, I love
that.
it.
Is a high
they are almost dead on accurate for everything. That one felt a little high for Ryan Strome. Like, something was going haywire in the data there that was putting his projection up a little bit higher than it should. I do still think it was value. I think he could have gotten 6 or 6.5 when you look at Palat going for 6 and what some other guys were getting out there in terms of point production. He was one of the top free agents available. So I do think they got a bargain for what they got him for. Maybe they went an extra year and were able to kind of get him at a little bit less, and more teams were looking at that kind of 4-year range. We'll never know. But he does significantly upgrade this team. Whether he plays at center or the wing, I'd prefer him personally on the wing. Just not a huge fan of him down the middle, but played a lot with Panarin last year. I think, Steven, I sent this to you. He played like 72% of his 5-on-5 minutes with Panarin, which I don't think is, like you said, I was a little concerned, but I don't think it's majorly concerning. It means he can complement skilled players, and he put up the production to show that. He is a guy who can sneakily be a 20-goal threat and a guy who's going to get you close to 45 to 50 points. When you look at this team, there's only 2 guys last year who got anywhere close to that, and it was Zegras and Terry. So to bring in another guy like that has that potential and has shown that consistency over the last couple of years is good. And then the power play threat. Now, I don't know how much of this is him individually or the fact that he played on a very good top power play unit for the New York Rangers.
Kreider,
Panarin, Zibanejad, Fox.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of it is him being the fifth man on a very, very good power play unit, but he's a great puck distributor. He's a really creative player. I do like the fit for him in the top 6. He brings something dynamic to this team outside of Zegras and Terry. Like I said, maybe a good complementary player to put with Mason McTavish. He's a guy you could play with Zegras or with Henrique, really with anybody, and I think he can get the job done on that line, whether he ends up being the primary creator on that line or if he ends up being the shooter. I think he's got a bunch of different tools in his locker to do a couple different jobs for the Ducks. So I like it. I mean, the 5th year is maybe a little bit much for me. The $5 million I'm kind of okay with because I think he could have gotten more. But I don't think it's going to be a contract that hurts the Ducks long term, right? Let's say you get 3 good years out of him. That contract is movable in the final 2 years of his deal, as long as he hasn't completely fallen off a cliff, and the production is tailed off at that point. So I do think it's a pretty good deal for the Ducks, and I like what he can bring.
I don't understand you because
you're not the only
one. One time he's like, a guy is good because he's playing with these good guys, and now you're saying, oh well, we got this guy and he played with good players, so he complements those good players. I just don't understand where the difference is, because it seems like, well, he's playing with good players, so now he looks better. But you're saying because he's able to play with those guys, that's a plus. It's like, well, he's not going to play with those players, so we're not going to get the same production he was getting at least last year. And more to the point on the power play. So those numbers are absolutely going to dip. I would assume, who knows, maybe we revamp the power play like it was in the beginning of the season, not as it was at the end.
Yeah.
But it's, I guess, fine, because once again, I don't necessarily care about this upcoming year, and I don't necessarily care at the amount of money, because we're going to have to pay somebody something. So why not pay this guy some money for a while? 5 years seems a little excessive as far as, where he's going to be when that contract ends. He's never hit even 49% as far as faceoffs go as a center through his entire career. He's fine. He's going to fill a void.
Yeah, but faceoffs still matter, Jay. Didn't you know that?
Yeah, no. It's
Faceoffs
the
still matter.
only thing that wins Stanley Cup games and playoffs
Faceoffs and grit.
cups. Yeah, that's it. And grit. So, it's fine. I nothing it mostly. It's like, all right, cool. Well, he's going to fill a spot and going to cost money so we can get to the floor for a while. Then maybe we ship him out. I'm not going like, oh my God, we got him. We're gonna be so good this year. Next year, 2 years, we're not doing great.
Yeah,
No,
I don't think there's anybody we
I don't
could have
feel
got
that
though
excited.
that would have put you over that edge, right? Unless it was like Johnny Gaudreau, and even then, you look at the makeup of this team, and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it was like, because the whole thing was like, our window is going to be in 3 years, so we want everyone to be that age going to this. This guy's going to be above that. I don't know, unless he is going to be that guy that his contract is up or he's movable on his contract. This is that guy who's going to kind of take that spot. Is about the only real reason I could see having him. That's it. I don't see what exactly he brings that's just all that much better than anything else.
I think it's better than what we have. I mean, you look at the last 3 seasons: 59 points in 70 games, 49 points in 56 games, and 54 points in 74 games and 21 goals last year. Like, it's not nothing. He does bring offense and production, and
To the
and I think right now you look at this team, he's the third best producer on this team behind Zegras and Terry in terms of potential production for next year. I would not be surprised to see him in that category next year unless somebody takes him.
That was under Gallant. And everyone all of a sudden blew up on that team. So,
but
I don't know. I don't see him factoring into an Eakins style of offense, and all of a sudden recreating these numbers on a worse team and a worse offensive system, and really being that much of a difference maker. I think if anything, it maybe fills a hole that Ryan Getzlaf left when he leaves. That's about it. Maybe from a leadership standpoint. I don't know.
Yeah. I get your point, because before the Rangers, and I'm trying to remember when Gallant, if he was there for the entire time that Strome was there.
2 seasons, I think Gallant's been there. 2 or 3 seasons.
So before Gallant, if we're saying 2019-20 was before Gallant, 59 points in 70 games, 33 and 63 before that, a few 30-point seasons with Edmonton and the Islanders, then a 50-point season back in 2014-2015. So he's done this before. He's done this in different systems with different coaches. So there is a potential. I completely get what you're saying. It's a worse team.
Thank you.
A coach that maybe he can't get the best out of Strome, whatnot. I just think in terms of, consistent production over the last couple of years, when we look at the wingers and the centers on this team, he's going to hold down a top 6 spot, and it's not because there's a shortage of wingers. There are on this team, but he's going to get there on merit because he does have that consistent production with him, where not a lot of players in this team do, right? Where you can put him in that conversation of guys who are going to be locks for the top 6: Zegras, Terry, Henrique, Strome, right? Of guys who have got consistent production, what you're going to get out of them. Those are 4 guys I think you could pencil in, which is, again, it's nice for the Ducks to have another guy like that. And with Silfverberg and Henrique coming off the books in 2 years, you've got then Strome as the kind of the go-to guy if both of them don't come back. I think we all assume Silfverberg's probably not. Maybe Henrique comes back, who knows? But it is nice to have a guy on the books for a little bit longer that you can say, okay, this guy's going to be here for a little while. And while he's here, he looks like he's going to be able to be a consistent producer for this team.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because I think you're kind of both right in some senses. I do think he doesn't substantially raise the ceiling for what this team can achieve. But I also think that his presence does help make the floor a little bit higher, because I do think he's a second line center. That's what he is. He's not a second line center in the traditional mold that Anaheim has tended to look for, but he is a second line center. And you can just say he's his own line now. Like, whoever you put with him, that's a line. I think I don't think Henrique has shown to be that guy, but I think bringing in Strome is going to free up Henrique in a way that I think will be meaningful. Either they're going to play together, or they're going to play on opposite lines, and they'll both be able to do that kind of same left-handed, smart type of play. I don't think Henrique's a little bit more of a two-way guy. Strome's a little bit more of an offensive guy, but I just think it creates a lot of options for Anaheim's lineup. And I think that kind of flexibility, but also stability of knowing that he's your second line center, I think that is going to pay big dividends in Anaheim, because if they want, they can put him at, nominally the first line center. Like Eric Stevens had an article came out today where he put out a couple different versions of the forward groups. And I think it makes a lot of sense, some of the points he made about, like, maybe Strome is your first line center in the way that he's older, but it's really Zegras, but you don't put that pressure of label on him. And I think
so tired of that narrative, by the way. But anyways, sorry.
Of what narrative? No, I'm really curious.
No, it's just like, oh, don't put that pressure on him. He's fragile. You're gonna ruin his confidence. Don't make him that first line center. Just save him. It's just like stop.
Okay.
Not you. I'm saying the narrative.
Yes. Well, he did have Getzlaf to be there, right, last year, in the sense of like another option. I do think you want to
insulate younger guys. I do think it's important to insulate
someone like Zegras' swagger. I mean, his confidence level is through the roof. You're not going to damage that.
I will say, like, I'm less inclined to do that for Zegras, and I'm like, okay, McTavish maybe you could do that with him next year, because he's only played 9 NHL games. We just watched Zegras ball out for an entire season where
and not give a flying F about anything.
I completely get
he doesn't care.
Yeah, like, Steven, I completely get what you're saying. I do like having options of guys you can kind of step up, and offensively they're going to produce. So it's like, okay, 90% of the weight of the offense is on Trevor Zegras to score 80 points next year. That's tough to put on a kid. I think he can do it. I'm not worried about him carrying the load. I think he can do it. I think he's got the skill and the confidence to do it. There is something to be said about having that depth behind a player where you're like, okay, you don't have to do it all. We can send another line out over the boards. They're going to be able to get it done and
set you up for success.
Yeah, in a sense, like, it's just not. He's not going out there every night, and I think he thrives under the pressure. But you're not having to send him out there every night and being like, listen, we're down a goal. Nobody else is going to get this done but you. I think he loves that. But it is nice 100%. To have.
I think
it is
he
nice
thrives
to have that
in that environment.
Yeah, it's nice to have that as a team, though, to be like, listen, we've got other options. Other guys are going to get it done. It's not you every night, because if you are continually losing, and you're the go-to guy and nobody else is helping out, no matter who you are, that's not fun, and that's a lot of pressure to put on a kid.
He's too smart, man. He's too smart. He's too confident. He's too talented. And there's just no way, in my opinion, that you can do anything that's going to take away Zegras' confidence. If anything, it could have been last season, and that was evident that wasn't there. And he just essentially took over the team. And it doesn't seem like at any point this kid's going to need to be sheltered, taken away from anything. He wants to be the guy. And even if it doesn't necessarily work out, he doesn't get down on himself. So I just can't see trying to shelter him and put him anywhere else besides the top line center.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. I don't.
Thank you.
I don't think it's an indictment in any way or a criticism of Trevor Zegras to be like, we're going to put an older, more established guy at first line center. We're going to let him continue to
Don't let him be
grow into this league, all that kind of stuff. But I do think it's more than fair to look at him and be like, if anybody's not going to be afraid, it's this kid. I think that is more than valid.
Yeah.
Just for me, I am in this way a little bit more conservative by nature. Like, I don't think there's any payoff to rushing any of the younger guys because they're not going to be fucking good next year. So there's no real reason for me to push anybody beyond what is, I don't know, like, you're pushing these guys to like push their limits to grow, to take on bigger roles, but I don't think you want to like overextend them in any way, right? I don't think you want Trevor Zegras to have to play 22, 23 minutes a night. Having a guy in Strome who you can put out there and they can play probably equal minutes, all things considered, I don't think that's a bad thing. And you have a guy like Strome who's going to be able to produce. There are going to be nights where Zegras doesn't score because there are nights where everybody doesn't score.
You take that back right now.
Yeah, we're looking for an 82 game point.
There will be there will be nights where other people don't score. And when those guys aren't scoring, it'll be nice to have Ryan Strome. And, I think one of the things that Verbeek said that I really liked was he said he brings a lot of intangibles and he's going to help these young guys grow.
Yeah.
Like, this seems to be a pretty like same page signing where Ryan Strome, based on what he said,
he seems pretty pumped to be here. I know every guy is, but there's different levels of interviews.
But neither of them to me are pumping it up beyond this team has a lot of young talent and I'm excited to see what we can do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nobody is coming in like making ridiculous proclamations.
Nobody's mentioned the word playoffs, so right. we're fine so far.
And so exactly. Stupid Mora family. So I think for me, that's kind of my thing with it. But I do think it's more than fair to say that Zegras is of a caliber and of a build that you can probably
you're less worried
with not breaking or bending or anything like that.
But
I just think Ryan Strome provides a lot in a lot of ways, and I'm really excited about it. It was a little bit more ambitious than I expected us to be honest. The fifth year, I think at first I didn't like, just because it was like, oh, that's about a year too long. But then, like, the more I sat with it, I'm like, I mean, the Silverberg and Henrique contracts are going to be up by then. The only real, we can talk about the blue line in a second. There's fucking nobody. Like, so they don't even have to worry about long-term contracts on the blue line. There's nobody there. Like, there's nobody to worry about. You have Cam's deal, and then you have whatever bridge deal Drysdale's going to get. Because I think Drysdale's going to end up with a bridge deal. Right? I expect him to sign
unless he pops off this year. That's the only.
Yeah, but maybe. But even then, like, I would not be surprised if he signed something similar to what Cam signed with his bridge deal, which was 4x4, I think.
Yeah.
No, he's getting Sergachev 8 years,
8x8,
20 million a year.
No, I think you're right. I mean, we'll get into this on other shows because we're not gonna have the time to get into it now. But for projected contracts, like if anybody's gonna sign an 8, it's Zegras and Terry are gonna sign long-term deals depending on. Terry maybe depending on his season next year, but I think he'll be fine. Zegras is going to get like a Jack Hughes type deal, which is going to turn out to be a steal, like an 8x8.5 or something like that. That is what and then Drysdale, a lot will depend on his season this year, but if you had to predict anybody to get a bridge deal, it would between the three of them, it would be him.
Because I think he makes the most sense to bet on himself, right?
100%, yeah, and he's not at that level of production and jumped up yet. Listen, we got half an hour. We gotta get through a lot of stuff because we're on a time limit today. So we gotta get through these topics.
What? Otherwise, no 3-hour podcast about
because you're fucking here
for 3 hours.
Kazakhstan.
We get for 3 hours because we start talking about why Trevor Zegras can handle the pressure of being a number one center when we're here to talk about Ryan Strome and Vatrano and free agency.
We spent like 20 minutes on Lord of the Rings and Johnny Gaudreau and Philadelphia.
Yes. That's why the shows end up being 3 hours. The Ducks made 5 other minor signings. Glenn Godden was, I guess, the most notable because the second year of his 2-year deal is a one-way deal. 50 points.
Okay, can we just talk about that not actually being a thing?
It's just notable because
we
it's
almost
different.
went right
It doesn't
past
mean
it.
anything.
It
Everybody's
doesn't
blown
mean
up
fucking
the.
anything. It's so
Everybody's blown.
stupid. It's like you can't waive a 1-year deal. It just means his salary's the same.
You know
That's all it means.
You know what's messed that up? NHL, the game, because there's a lot of people. If you ask them, I think they don't know because in the game, two-way means you can move them to the minors without waivers, but that's not how it works. It's just
No,
different
it doesn't.
salary. Two-way deal means you get a certain salary in the minors, a certain salary in the NHL, and that's it.
Yes,
There's
exactly.
no difference.
That's all it is.
But that was the only contract that was
They
different.
almost drove right past it, and Steven's like rubbernecking
tried.
on the 91 freeway. It's like, huh? Let's talk about that.
He's like Sam Steele. He had a really, really great year in junior. 125 points, 50 goals with Swift Current a few years ago. He's been pretty productive in the AHL. Played a few games with the Flames, but apparently 20 teams were interested, and he came to the Ducks. I think he has a better shot at making the lineup in Anaheim than anywhere else. Chase Deleo back with the team. Nice to see him back. Productive year in Utica.
Murata, local boy.
Yeah, so he's still looking for his first NHL goal, first NHL point, and he can do that in Anaheim, which would be nice. And another Stockton player, Justin Kirkland, signed a 1-year deal. Another New Jersey product, Colton White, signed. That's an interesting one. Played 27 games with the Devils last year, more than any of these guys combined in the NHL. And another defenseman already, Austin Strand from the Kings system, played most of his games with the Reign last year. So not much to get into with those guys, but 5 kind of minor league signings. Maybe a few of them like White and Godin see some time with the Ducks during the season with injuries and whatnot. But the second half of this show, because we've left it with like almost no time, we have to get to is what could the Ducks do next? Because we're only 3 days into free agency now, right? Or is it, I guess, 3 days. Third day into free agency. Nazem Kadri hasn't signed anywhere. John Klingberg hasn't signed anywhere. The Ducks are right now $9.23 million below the cap floor, so they have to do something. They do have the RFAs to sign that we mentioned, Lindstrom and Benoit, that they have to get under contract, so that, and Vakanainen, so that's going to eat up maybe $4 or $5 million, but they still do need to do something, whether it's a trade or a signing. So we've heard them passively linked with Nazem Kadri. I can't imagine those rumors are more than the Ducks have a lot of cap space and a spot for him in the lineup, so let's link him to Kadri, because there's been nothing other than, the Ducks are one of the teams that are interested. That's literally the extent of the rumors of where he could
We're
go.
also interested in McDavid, but
Yeah.
it's not going to happen.
Yeah, for what he could get, which is probably $7.5 million for Nazem Kadri.
I think he's going higher.
He could. I think
imagine
they
he's
hit
gonna
market, and they were a little bit surprised that nobody was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna hand you $8.5 million for 7 years." I think the reason we haven't heard anything yet is there's some teams that are the most interested that have to clear space. Colorado,
That's it.
He wants to go back to that. They're looking to find a way to bring him back. Is behind McKinnon, they don't have anything, so they need to bring him back if they can. So they're going to look to clear space. The Islanders might bring him, so they need to clear some space to bring him in. Dallas might be rumored in him to be interested, and they have to clear space as well. So those are teams that could be interested. I think with the amount of time we've had to sit here and wait, I think people have just looked at, okay, where could he play and play a big role, and who has the money for him? And Anaheim jumps to the top of the list because people have seen us sign Strome and a few others, so he's been kind of in that mix. It would be a long shot. I put a jersey on the line that he doesn't come to Anaheim. If he comes to Anaheim,
I want it.
Yeah, if he comes to Anaheim, I owe one of our Twitch followers a jersey, so I am highly confident.
I'm a Twitch follower. Do you owe me a jersey?
Yeah, the Ferry Mighty
All right,
account
it's
as
gotta
a
happen.
whole is a Twitch follower, so then it gets split in 4 between the 4 of us. So at least I saved.
All right, I
some
get the
of my
right
money.
arm.
Quick thoughts, because I don't want to spend forever on this, because I know all the people want us to talk about it. I just don't think it's going to happen. Would you want him here? What would you be comfortable with as a term or?
Not much. I mean, once again, it's like if this guy's going to get anything, and this is his payday, so he's looking for either term or money, and either of that. I mean, when I say term, I mean at a minimum. I gotta think like 4 or 5 years, maybe 3 if you really squeeze it out. But I mean, this is kind of what he's waited for. He's had that, that little asterisk on his name. Oh, you can't win the cup with Kadri. He'll cost your team. And he obviously proved that wrong and had just a complete breakout year. So he's going to get paid. wherever he goes, unless he takes the Colorado hometown discount to try and repeat because he thinks this is now the next dynasty, is about the only way I can see that happening. Other than that, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the Ducks, really. We're still, 3 years away from our real compete level, and you're just watching one good year, and obviously he's still got injury bug stuff too. So it's like, in 3 years, he's going to be all that much less inclined to get injured. And how much money are you committing to him for him to eventually be there? I just think when we get to that point, there's probably another free agent somewhere else.
Yep.
It's got a longer pedigree that can probably help us out. So I'd say pass. Thank you. That's good, but no thanks.
Yeah. Well, Steven, you and I talked about that too, about approaching free agents and being in the window. And we got into some Twitter arguments over that with some people in the sense that, yeah, this would make sense for the Ducks if they were in a window to be adding a player like this, but they're just a few years short of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I would be much more comfortable giving him 2 years by $10 million than I would 4 years by $8 million. I would rather give him a ton of money for 1 year, genuinely, I would rather do a 1 year, $10 million deal and be like, just fuck it. Here's free $10 million. Just come play, be a fucking monster on this team. If we're not anywhere near the playoffs, we'll trade you.
He wouldn't do that.
He wouldn't do it. But what I am saying is that, to me, is preferable to anything with term, because his style of play is conducive to him breaking down early. He's an incredibly physical guy. You can say what you want about him, but he's logged some serious minutes because he was a first-line center for Toronto for a long time. Just by the fact they didn't fucking have anybody on the team.
Then they shipped him out of town.
He's made some playoffs runs.
Because he was a liability in the playoffs, and then he rubbed it in their faces when he won.
The first year in his new place, he did in fact get himself kicked out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things. I'm so happy for him. I really do hope he is able to find a 5x8, something like that in that range, because you would like to see that career year that he had genuinely appreciated and benefit for him. Yeah. So, I just don't see it in Anaheim. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's a step backwards for him in a way that doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. With Josh Manson, it was different because Josh Manson had a pre-existing link. I believe his wife is from Orange County.
Well, and what role he's going to get. You know the role he's going to get. He fits that
not only
role.
that, but it makes more sense for him to come back because he already has ties to the team, right? He already has ties to the community in certain ways. The fact that he won a cup, and then can come back and now just kind of be a veteran player, a mentor, a leader in the room, right? That kind of stuff. I don't think that makes way more sense to me than somebody who had the kind of year that Kadri did coming in. And we talked about it a little bit, I would be fine with some of those Taylor Hall type deals. That's what I would do that for Kadri, tomorrow, 1x8. If that's what you want, we have the fucking room, and let's do that, and let's see if we can move you. But there's no reason for Kadri to do that. It takes too much risk.
He's a guy who's going to cash in. He's in the point where after the season he had that he needs to cash in. I think he's found his niche in the way he can play, and the lineup that he fits best in is the second line center behind a bona fide number one like McKinnon. I think that's where he fits best. I think he can replicate his success if he goes back to Colorado, which is why I think he's waiting to see, because yes, it's about the money, but if I was him, what do again, shots at the cup, that comes into the conversation as well. Do you leave $1 million, per year on the table to get a couple more shots at the cup? Do you, think about leaving some money on the table to just, your role here? You're going to fit better here than maybe you would in a Calgary, or maybe you would with the Islanders or in Anaheim, where, again, maybe he goes back to being in that 1C with Calgary. Does he jump above Elias Lindholm? Does he jump above Matt Barzal? Or, if he comes to Anaheim, because of the money he commands, does he become the 1C above Trevor Zegras because of the season he had and the money, the money he commands for his contract? I think he fits better as a number two. I think long term, Zegras is obviously the number one, and you could see that maybe working out here. But yeah, I can't see it happening. I think for him, I think the best situation is to go back to Colorado. They're going to move some cap space. If we have time, we're going to get to some trade targets for the Ducks that could see them help Colorado move some money out to get Kadri back there. Some of the other names, PK Subban on defense, haven't heard anything about him, but he's one that I think I've heard a lot of people say that they wouldn't mind bringing in to the Ducks. Phil Kessel, Nino Niederreiter, Evan Rodriguez, if you want to add another forward to this team. Any of those guys of interest to you guys? Anybody that, outside of them that you'd be interested in bringing in?
Keith Yandel and Phil Kessel.
Yeah,
Bring my beautiful American Iron Man.
I'm surprised this is the first time I've heard you mention Keith Yandel, because you loved Keith Yandel.
I love Keith. I do love Keith Yandel. He rocks. He's Olin Zellweger. Like, if
Okay.
best.
Okay, all right. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Pump the brakes there, kid.
He's an undersized, left-handed, all offensive player.
Is he
like
small?
that's
Those are
just
three things they might have in common. Yes.
Why did I think Keith Yandel was like 6'3"?
I don't know.
No, he's 6'1". He's 6'1".
Keith Yandel.
Keith Yandel was like 5'10", right?
6'1".
His greatest
Oh.
contribution last season was that he kept an iron streak alive for as long as he could in Philly, and that's about it.
Should've never left.
I'd rather take a PK Subban, and then just literally anyone with a big name that could potentially bring you some sort of return at the trade deadline. Because literally any of these big names at this point, you just bring in and then you trade them, you flip them at the trade deadline, because this team's not going to, go very far. But if you bring in these guys, they're already going to kind of jump in those top roles. So whether it's Yandel, he might be your 3-4, your PK Subban, who could easily be, that. Jeez, I don't even know what you would call Subban in this team. But if you can sign him at a small deal and then you blow through the season, most of that money gets taken away. You trade him at the deadline, even retain some salary, something that gets you to the floor of the salary cap, and then you get assets later. Because at this point, no one out there is going to fit into our window of in 3 years. Klingberg, maybe, but that's a maybe.
Yeah, and it'd be tough to sell him on coming in. I think you have to give him more than another team, would.
Other than he's going to get a lot more time to play.
Yeah, other than
That's
saying
about
you're
it.
the number one right-handed defenseman on this team, you get power play one, whatever. That's the only thing you could sell him at this point. I think Klingberg would be a long shot. It sounds like he's
the same as
Kadri. Yeah.
It would make more sense to give him a 1-year big money deal than it would to give him anything with term.
Yeah, and then you just flip him or whatever. So
yeah, see where you're at the end of the day.
Yeah,
move it on.
I like PK Subban if you can give him like a 2-year deal, because like we said, Shattenkirk's likely moved at the deadline, depending on where the Ducks are at that point, and then PK kind of would jump into this.
Why wouldn't you just sign PK to a 1-year deal? Why should
I just don't know. I don't know if he would take.
It depends who you're willing to trade at the deadline. Whether it's a Shattenkirk has more value or PK.
But
Subban.
I don't think you have to trade him. This is something.
That's exactly what you should do.
I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm saying you don't have to.
Oh yeah. I'm not saying that either. You don't.
There's no reason.
You don't even have to sign him.
Just let PK Subban walk to free agency.
Yeah.
You can just let it happen.
Yeah, and just pick somebody
It's
up
fine.
again. You recycle.
Just let it
Sign it for $1 million. Do a Danny Heatley type deal.
That's what. See, that is exactly right. That to me is exactly right.
That didn't work out too well though.
But that's
Did it really hurt us? Did it?
No, you're right.
$1 deal, and you say maybe next year we give you a deal with some term, we raise the cap hit, something like that. But just let them fucking go to free agency. Not everything has to be a win.
Yeah,
you can just let guys leave. It's
Trade for a
okay.
5th rounder.
I honestly I think he's
you
going
don't
to ask
have to.
for more than one though. That's where I'm coming from here. Is I'd sign him for a 1-year deal over anything in a heartbeat. I think he's going to ask for at least 2 for a little bit of stability to stay somewhere for a little bit longer. I think he would love to come to California. I think Anaheim of the California teams would probably be the only one that
laid back lifestyle that he seems to personify.
Yeah,
he's pretty laid back. I think he'd probably be into the lifestyle, so to speak. But
yeah, I like. I mean, the Ducks need to add something to the defense because it's shambles right now outside of Fowler and Drysdale. Essentially, Shattenkirk's going to play, and then from there it's Mahura, Benoit, Vakanainen, and then whoever else. Colton White is number 7 right now, the guy we just signed.
Yeah, we gotta have. We need another established.
You need somebody
established.
I think right now you get that through trade, which we might as well move on to. The only one thing I have a shout for Nino Niederreiter as a potential option. Now he might end up being way too much. If it's close to a Strome deal, I say no. If you can get him a little bit cheaper on a shorter term, I do like that as another goal-scoring threat for the Ducks. I think if they can add a winger, you want to add somebody like that who's shown they can be a 20-goal score threat. Another guy you maybe, if you don't want to play Vatrano up on that line, that you could play Nito Niederreiter there, a bigger guy who has a good shot that you could play with Trevor Zegras. I do like that.
Strengthen the second power play unit.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you're going to add another forward, I think they only really need one. A guy like Nino that you could add that if it's going to be a goal scorer, I think would be a good fit for the Ducks. Okay, trade targets, potential trade targets. We've refreshed it a little bit from our last trade target discussion and looked at a few different options. Teams that are looking to dump salary to either sign players like Colorado, teams that just could use to dump salary to sign RFAs, teams like Pittsburgh who are moving good players that are good, but also to dump salary, and then a few other kind of RFAs who look like the teams don't have enough cap space to sign. So we'll start with the first one, Patrick Hornqvist in Florida. He makes $5.3 million for the next year. We've talked about it before. Florida's $3 million above the cap right now. They need to do something to be cap compliant. He's the most likely option to move out. You might be able to get another asset to take him out of there. We've talked about this one before. He's shown that he had some great underlying numbers last year. If you play him up in the lineup, play him kind of middle 6 minutes, that he could be a good contributor, a good veteran to the team. I don't mind it. I think the key for this one is if you're taking on $5.3 million and you're doing this one, you're getting another asset there. You're getting a prospect, you're getting a pick or something like that to get him out of there and help them in their cap situation.
Yeah.
I just think, all right, well, once again, it's just like, if you're going to insert him, you're going to insert him in the top two lines. So who are you moving down? Who are you moving out?
I don't think you have to with him. I think he could
I
play
don't think
third
you
line.
have to at all. I think at this point he's a third liner. And I think he provides, a similar dynamic to what we've been talking about. Like if you're, again.
He's a Max Jones, right? But just like a
He's like
better
Silverberg. He's like Silverberg. I think that's a good spot.
I thought he was more of like an agitator.
He has that part of his game, but I think he's a
I always remember being like a dick right in front of the
yeah,
net.
I think that's gone away a little bit.
That's why I don't like him. He pokes people, goalies with sticks. I like it.
He's been a 20 goal scorer for almost all his career until the last couple of years, and he was on pace for it.
Was he on Pittsburgh for most of it, playing with
Nashville and Pittsburgh?
Crosby?
Yeah. Yeah, so Nashville and Pittsburgh, every season except the last two in Pitt, he put up 20-goal seasons, and he was on pace for the last two seasons in Pittsburgh to put up 20. He put 18 and 17 and 69 and 52 games. And then pretty good seasons in Florida, 14 goals in 44 games and 11 and 65 last year. That was by far the worst season of his career. He's 35 now, so obviously the downturn is starting.
I just don't remember him being like as an elite goal scorer, just more or less the consistent guy in the middle of the he was in the way and cashed in. But he did it really well.
Yeah, and I think a veteran presence, a guy who's been on some pretty good teams, and again, the key part of this one is you're not trading to bring him in specifically. You are to add salary. You can play in your lineup. You need another forward, but you're getting another asset. The type of trades that Verbeek talked about in helping teams kind of dump salary using your cap space to your advantage.
And I guess it comes down to, what do you think Verbeek's going to do? Is he actually going to go out, try and get people that are going to make this team better, or is he literally going to take on salary just to meet the floor and take on most of those prospects or draft picks? I think the latter there is the more likely thing. At this point, if he hasn't gone out and spent the money on the free agency he wants, and he's got almost $10 million to try and make up, he's going to try and make other GMs' lives a little bit easier. That helps him down the road, helps him in his current situation, and builds up a prospect or draft pool. So I feel like that's one definite option. But his thing is, whoever he brings in, he's not exactly making them to be, from this point on, someone that's going to all of a sudden make this team a better team.
Yeah, no, I for sure. I think if the Ducks are bringing on salary right now, other than the guys we talked about, the probably the best way to do that right now is through trade, is to get up to that cap floor. We'll see what Lundestrom and Benoit Vakanainen signed for, but at the very least, they're going to have $4 or $5 million that they still need to get just above the floor. And I imagine they're probably going to sit around 64, 65 million, so they'll have a little bit more room to work with there too. Okay, next option on the list. This one is an RFA for Vegas, Nick Hegg. Vegas is $1.4 million over the cap right now. They've got a lot of defensemen on their roster. They have 3 RFAs to sign, including Hegg with Nick Roy and Keegan Colasai. They have Weber's LTIR, so if they make it to the season, they're fine because they're going to put Weber's 7.4 on the LTIR, and they'll be fine. But the problem is they have to be cap compliant to get there. So they have to shed some salary. They're going to have to sign these guys. If you sign these guys even to kind of 1 year, $1 million deals, that still puts you $4 to $5 million over the cap. So you've got to do something. I think if you're looking at not being able to sign these guys, I think Nick Hegg is a good option for the Ducks, a 23-year-old young defenseman, left shot that I personally think just the amount of minutes he played for Vegas would be an upgrade on Vakanainen and Mahura and Benoit right now, and it could be a guy that you slot beside a Jamie Drysdale as a big, rangy defensive defenseman. I think that'd be a good pairing for him, and then that allows you to kind of split up that pairing of Fowler and Drysdale that was kind of on and off last year.
Yeah, I got no problem with that. I think there's something to be said that maybe you don't want to help out a team in your division who's clearly a contender, but like at the same time, like if you can pick up an asset that makes the rest of it worth it, like what do you get a shit? You're not going to be good this year anyways, so whoever wins the cup doesn't matter.
Yeah, and Vegas is just they're a very slowly sinking ship, in my opinion.
Desperate.
They're just grabbing on whatever can work at this last moment. They had their shot. And they went full for it. They almost got it, but my God, they are going to fall hard.
Yeah. Part of me putting him on the list is I've been looking for good pairings for Jamie Drysdale, guys that I think would be good compliments for him. And I mean, Nick Hegg, 6'6", 230, and a pretty good puck mover too. Yeah, I think 17 points in 50 games last year. So yeah, like he seems like a good option, and I'm sure Vegas doesn't want to lose him. But when you're $1.4 million over the cap and you've got a few more RFAs to sign, sometimes it's a luxury you can't afford.
I didn't realize he was that tall. Get him.
Yeah, he's a big kid. Another one along the same lines is Rasmus Sandeen in Toronto, because Toronto is signed well above the cap as well. Actually, I think they're only about $200K over the cap. But they have Rasmus Sandeen as an RFA. They have not Calle Yarncrook. They just signed yet Calle Yarncrook. They have Pierre Engvall as an RFA as well. Sandeen's whole situation is, I know like the Leafs want to keep him. He's their left-handed D of the future after Muzzin's contract expires. But he's blocked right now by Riley, Muzzin, and Giordano and Brody. Who's their Brody, Liljegren, and I'm missing. I think Hull as their top six.
They signed Giordano too.
Yeah. They've got Jordy Ban and Victor Mete
like 2 years or something
as well.
Right?
So they've got like 10 defensemen right now. That they really need to move somebody out. Now Sandy doesn't.
That's
give
weird.
them
We
cap
have
relief.
3.
Yeah. So we could use some of it, and Sandy is very good. He had some great underlying numbers last year. He's a former, I think, first round pick. Really good young defenseman. So they don't want to lose him, but you can't sign him right now. It's impossible. Pierre Engvall, I think they're okay if they have to let him walk or they move his rights or something like that. Sandeen's a tough one to lose, but the other options are you move Justin Hall out, who makes $2 million, and maybe that frees you up enough cap space. Maybe it doesn't. Or you move Jake Muzzin, which there's been rumors, but Jake Muzzin's a leader in that locker room. They brought him in for a reason. They don't really have any other players like him. He's got the cup experience. He's wore the A last year for them. So he's a guy that, it's a tough move to say, as a team with really only 2 years left of contention with Matthews' contract up, I don't think Muzzin's the guy you move right now. I think you kind of got to keep him there, and you don't want to say, okay, we move Muzzin out, and Sandeen, you're going to be our number 2 defenseman on the left side. Let's see if you can bring the same type of production. I don't think they're in the spot where they can do that right now. I would love Rasmus Sandeen if they could bring him in, but I don't think it's possible.
No, I would give them a second-round pick next year, or this upcoming draft, what the middle second-round pick, NMS 3. Give them the middle one. Just whichever one is second in the second round.
That'll be
that's the one you
Boston.
get. Yeah, it should be. And then, you take that to the bank and you walk away. I think you have to pay close to whatever market value is, because he is a really good player. He's going to be under team control. But at the same time, you have to make it as painful as possible for Toronto. And if you can give up as little as possible to bring in a player of that quality, I think, that could do a lot of good for the team.
Yeah, and I don't think you're getting Jake Muzzin out of there. I don't think you want to get Jake Muzzin out of there anyway, but Sandeen is, again, same with Hegg. Sandeen's the guy. that you kind of want to bring out of that team if you can, and try and snake a young defenseman. It's going to cost you something, right? It's not, you're not helping with cap relief. You're going to have to give up some assets to bring a guy like that in, but you get a young 20, 22, 23-year-old defenseman that can jump in your lineup, and he's better than a lot of the other guys we have in that spot already. So it is a good move for them. So the next one we have, Pittsburgh Penguins. This one's been a pretty big rumor going around. They're looking to move out some salary. They're $200K over the cap right now. They have an RFA and Kasperi Kapanen. They've made really all their moves, bringing Malkin back, bringing Letang back. They seem ready to go, signing Raquel. But they need to move some salary out. So Pettersson makes, I think, 4 for the next 3 seasons. Marino makes 4.4 for the next 5, and Zucker makes 5.5 for next season. They've got to move one of them. I think all of them are options. Marcus Pettersson would be nice to see him back in Anaheim. There's obviously a spot right underneath Cam Fowler for him. There's Marino on the right too that you can easily bring him in, and there's a spot for him. And then Zucker would be like the Patrick Hornqvist trade, right? It would be a complete cap dump. I gotta mention it. If Jay had to head out. He kind of just didn't say anything because we were talking about the trades. But Jay had to go, so we're going to continue the rest of the show out without him here and cover some of the potential trade targets. But what do you think of some of those options for Pittsburgh?
You can get a lot out of there. You can get Sam Poulin in another pick or something like that and give yourself a couple pieces with some upside. Retain on Zucker down the line, flip him again, pick something else up. I'm sure. I don't think, he spent his career in Minnesota and then got to Pittsburgh after. So, he hasn't won anything. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to try to, get a year to bounce back and get his feet back under him and play a little bit closer to how he was playing before he got to Pittsburgh. And just see what happens. And if not, there's nothing wrong with having that guy on the team. He's a decent two-way guy. His production's dropped off, but I think part of that's injury. And then obviously, I love Marino and I love Pettersson. I think bringing in Pettersson would be huge. I think he would just provide a very simple steadiness to an Anaheim lineup that can use it on the left side. I just think he's just a good defenseman. Like, I just don't think I don't think there's anything that you could say that is bad by bringing him in. He's only 26 years old. He's on an incredibly team-friendly contract, and he's just good. Like, he's good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's not going to create a lot of offense for you. I think his numbers would have popped by now in a team like Pittsburgh, where, they made Carl Hagelin look like a fucking Selke finalist. So, as far as I think he's concerned, like, I just think he'd be an incredibly simple and steady presence to have. I think you could play him with Drysdale and they would look really nice together. John Marino is right-handed, good skater, plays a little bit more of a defensive game. He's got, some offense to him, but I think he's much more of like a shutdown-esque, a modern shutdown-esque guy. I honestly, Pittsburgh makes so much sense to me. And Pittsburgh is a team that could use some of the pieces in Anaheim, to be honest. There's always the goalie thing. But even beyond that, a young winger like Max Comtois would probably be huge to them. Somebody said it in the Twitch chat. Like, you could make a really strong argument for trading Max Jones to Pittsburgh. That could be exactly somebody that Brian Burke and Ron Hextall. No. Dude,
I get what you're
like,
saying. It makes so much sense.
Saying,
they'd be a guy that
Pittsburgh is again. Pittsburgh has again just continued to be a team that they just fit Anaheim for trade targets, right? I mean, you could you could reasonably make a trade where you traded two of my favorite players on the team in Jones and Gibby, and get back a return that is unquestionably makes the trade good for both sides, right? You could absolutely have a win-win trade with some of those players and with Pittsburgh. anybody is going to be motivated to do that, I don't know. Gibson, Gibson doesn't seem to want to move. He wants to seem to be here. I think sometimes we forget that as much as players want to play where they grew up, some players don't because they fucking know everybody. Like, they know
the market sometimes and everything too, home, right? So.
Yeah, sometimes moving home isn't exactly as much fun as you think it might be for some of these guys.
Just ask Ryan Suter and Zach Parise in Minnesota. So
yeah, exactly. So I think there's Pittsburgh is always going to be a fascinating team with Anaheim. I mean, again, this is how they end up as fucking 4-hour podcasts. But you can go all the way back to the lottery and the Bobby Ryan, Sidney Crosby thing. Like, basically since then, the timelines in Anaheim and Pittsburgh have been fascinating. Just not even necessarily that they mirror each other or anything like that, because obviously they don't as far as success, if nothing else. But just kind of the way they always seem to be in a position to help each other in these really weird little ways. So it's a fascinating team. It's a team that I think there's a lot of possibilities with. And it's, again, I wonder if any of it happens. I think picking up a guy like Pettersson for super cheap, maybe in a Pacioretty deal, right? Like, it's futures. Yeah. Something like that, like him and Pauline for future considerations or something like that, or like a 5th round pick or some stupid shit. There's nothing to lose. Anaheim has, a pretty remarkable opportunity right now to be as aggressive and creative as they want in weaponizing their cap space and their assets. They've got 3 second-round picks this year.
They've got a lot of flexibility. Okay, bear with me for a second. Since there's only 2 of us, this won't make it to the audio version. I'm going to switch to the nicer-looking screen, so I'll have to pull Steven back in here because you're gonna disappear for a second. But it's a nicer-looking screen for 2 people, so I'm going to bring you back in here, and then we'll launch it back up. Boom, now you're the entire screen.
That's terrifying. Oh, God, that's awful. I'm watching the Twitch stream on my phone. That is ungodly. Why is there a coffee cup?
Yeah, the jar didn't want to load in good. Okay, there we go. Yeah, this screen, I like it better. It looks nicer. It's a lot cleaner for the 2 of us, but... Yes, Marcus Pettersson. I think if I had to pick between the 3 of them, between Pettersson, Marino, and Zucker, I think, but all their, the cap hits specific for the longer term guys and Pettersson and Marino, that would be kind of key parts of this team. They're not bad, 4x3 and a 4.4x5. Those are fine. They're not bad deals. They're not something that you're going to be like, oh man, like this is going to hurt me. They're young enough. I think they're around 25, 26, both of them, that you can see it being valuable for this team throughout the duration of that contract. I think I would opt for Marcus Pettersson because I see his fit in the lineup. You can play him with a guy like Jamie Drysdale, a nice option on that left side to go with Cam Fowler. But again, you can see Marino, where Marino could fit too, is the second right-hand option behind Drysdale above Shattenkirk, and a different type of right-handed defenseman, right? Something, again, like Josh Manson was between the 2 of them, a different option, not a puck-moving offensive defenseman, a bit more of a physical 2-way guy, shutdown type guy. So I can see both of them. I'd like it. Zucker, again, like we said, would be a Hornqvist type deal. Maybe you get a Sam Poulin or something to take that cap space and free it up for them, all of which are possible for Anaheim. I think in Pettersson Marino deals, you're moving something out. Maybe it's a Comtois, maybe it's a Jones or something like that going the other way. And then you go out and try and get a forward somewhere else. So I definitely think those ones are all options.
And I think Marino would be the most expensive. Yeah. The 2 things, Marino is definitely the player they most want to keep. And the other thing that I think is worth saying is, bringing in a guy like Marino gives Anaheim, it's almost like they drafted a Chesley or picked up a Faber, right? It's that kind of modern shutdown right-handed defenseman. I don't think Marino's very big. I know he can be physical, but I don't think he's an overly physical player. I think he's closer to like Hellison than obviously like Manson, who is an overtly physical guy. And he's a guy that you can project to be on this team for the long haul. You can see exactly where he fits in, exactly what the benefit of playing him with people are, and it makes a lot of sense. I would be curious to know what ends up being the cost. I mean, he seems like a guy that you're trading, like you said, a Comtois and maybe even a pick or a Mahura, right? Give him another body. Something like that I think could be really interesting. But
because as much as they're cap dumps by Pittsburgh, they're still good players that have produced well.
Yeah, exactly. It's you relative to your role, you are overpaid for what we're asking of you. Or I think in Marino's case, it's probably most fair to say we can maybe live without you, and you will get us something meaningful in return in a trade. So
no, I like him. Those are some of my favorite ones. Like with this next one, the most interesting thing for me going through this again and looking at some of the situations the teams are in after they've signed players is seeing how many deals that could be made out there of salary dumps where the Ducks could get assets in for taking on contracts. There's always been a lot. We've talked about a ton of them before the draft and after the draft, and now on our free agency preview show. But now with more players signed and teams' cap situations kind of starting to settle down, you're starting to see more of those opportunities. Montreal's kind of jumped out as one of those teams that could move some players out. I listed Jonathan Drouin and Mike Hoffman as options, and only because Montreal's just under the cap ceiling. They've got one RFA to sign, and it's Kirby Dach. Now, he's not going to command a lot of money, but they need to sign him. He's probably going to make $2 or $3 million, you would imagine. And, yeah, I think so. I mean...
Do we don't think he gets something closer to Troy Terry? He hasn't looked better than Troy Terry.
He could get like a 2x2 or something like that, maybe a 2x1.5. I don't think he signs into the 3-year deal. Either way, like his signing puts them over the cap. They don't have Weber as LTIR anymore. Right. Drouin has been floated out there as potential, cap dump to other teams to get better players. They are heavily invested in Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think it came out today that they had a trade in place, or talking pretty close to having a trade in place with Winnipeg for Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then it turned into the Kirby Dach trade instead. Maxime Comtois, the French connection would make sense for them. I don't think you have to pay for any of these guys, so if you're sending a player like Comtois back and then taking Drouin, you're getting a pretty good asset in return. Montreal has some nice prospects that you could look at, and I like the potential reclamation project of Jonathan Drouin. It'd be the reclamation project 2.0, but you can see where he could fit in the team, right? Is a top 6 winger. Mike Hoffman it's a little bit less enticing, $4.5 million for the next 2 seasons. Drouin's 5.5 just for next year, so you could even retain 50% and flip him at the deadline. That's probably my more enticing option, is to bring Drouin in. But they're both pretty good ones, and I think if Montreal is desperate to ship some cap space out to go after some other players, they might be able to attach a nice prospect or draft pick to that as well. And I'd be fine taking Montreal's draft pick. So
yeah, I mean it's a weird situation because they're in this situation, like you said, where they are kind of needing to create a little bit of cap space, but they also don't need to turn that cap space into meaningful players. So, it would almost make sense to me for them to want to trade Drouin before Hoffman, even if they would love to get rid of Hoffman. I just don't think there's anything to lose by holding him for a year and seeing what he is as an expiring, give him another chance to put up 20, 25 goals on that team under Martin St. Louis. Maybe, the offense that kind of came to life at the end of the season for Montreal rolls over into next season, and they have a strong power player. They're putting up solid numbers or whatever. Like, they're still going to lose, fucking 70% of their games. But I do think, it doesn't hurt them to hold on to him. Apparently, they're still looking into maybe even trading Evgeny Dadonov. Now, obviously, he, for very obvious reasons, isn't necessarily a trade target for Anaheim. But, they have a lot of options. I know they're still trying to move Jeff Petrie, even though they don't want to retain because there's some term left on that. Like, I just think Montreal is a very weird one because I don't know that either team has anything to offer the other.
Yeah, we're both in the same spot, right? It's not like they're going to dump cap space to try and sign somebody to get better. And both teams are aiming to be not great next year and get a higher draft pick. So it is always tough to facilitate those cap dumps between those two teams. The only difference, the only way I think there's potential fit there is, again, the Ducks have a ton of cap space, and Montreal's kind of up against the cap. And if they get backed into a situation where they can't move Hoffman, they can't move Petrie, then maybe Drouin becomes the option, and you float that out there. Who's interested in taking on Drouin? We're willing to give this up for him. That's where the Ducks step in and say, okay, listen, like, we'll take him. We want this. And then maybe a deal goes from there. Because, yeah, it isn't like a traditional partner that you would look at and say, okay, that makes sense. But if Montreal gets backed in the corner, I think Drouin is a potential option to move. And Anaheim could be interested in one of those deals like Hornqvist and Zucker, where you take on that salary and get something for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even think he played last year. I know he's kind of had some off-ice struggles with some stuff. So, I think he would make the most sense of anybody, because there's probably a fair amount of uncertainty about whether or not he's even going to play next year, played last year, that deal. And if Anaheim can pick up almost $6 million in cap hit without having to take on a roster player, I mean, depending on what you get, I don't think that's bad. I mean, I was thinking about it, and I think maybe you could talk yourself into Max Comtois or Isaac Lundestrom being guys that Montreal is interested in. But, again, they're not in any rush to be competitive. Yep. And Anaheim might as well just keep those guys, even if it's only for one more year, just to see what they are. Both guys are still under team control at the end of the season. So,
you don't want to move those guys unless it makes your team better, right? You're getting another younger player.
Yeah, or you're getting a premium asset, right? Like, if you're getting a premium asset.
You said Pettersson or Marino. Like, if you're getting that, then it makes sense in a way, so.
Or their second-round pick you could talk me into, right? Because that's almost guaranteed to be between 33 and 40. Like, it's going to be very hard to finish much higher than that. So, you could talk me into it, but I just think it's a harder fit. Like, it's kind of the inverse of what we were saying about Pittsburgh, that there just doesn't seem to be a very easy, logical fit, other than, well, this guy makes a lot of money and we kind of need to not have money. So,
Yeah, it was interesting going through the teams and seeing, there's definitely some options, but some of them have hang-ups like that one. You got 4 more potential trade options. Next one's another RFA situation in Edmonton with a player who's been linked to be out the door. So the Oilers have right now $1.3 million in cap space. They have 2 RFAs, Jesse Puljujarvi and Kyler Yamamoto. Puljujarvi seems like the likeliest to move. His name's been floated around since before the draft. Still haven't seen anything materialize there. I think the Oilers could probably get Yamamoto signed with that 1.3 left. Again, like you said before, with similar to like a Troy Terry type deal where you're getting them for a few years, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. So I think Yamamoto could fall in there. But then Puljujarvi seems to be making his way out, and that would be a type trade where you see like a Comtois for Puljujarvi or something like that, right? Where it's a swap.
That actually makes
swap of 2 younger players that haven't kind of gotten to the point you had hoped. And for Comtois' case, he hasn't got back to that. He's only had 1 season to get back there, but didn't live up to the 1 season where he led the Ducks to scoring. And for Puljujarvi, it's never really fulfilling the potential of
from a production
being the third overall pick. Domino's in the chat said might as well just offer sheet him. I don't at that point. I mean, I don't know if it's worth it, and you don't. I don't think teams never offer sheet in general, so we're not going to see it. Like, yeah, sure, offer sheet him, but it's not going to happen, right? Like, I would say offer sheet Sandeen right now, because the Leafs have no cap space to sign him. They'd have to rush out the door to try and move somebody like Hall out to be able to sign him. Sure, you can do that. But GMs don't do that for star players, let alone guys like Puljujarvi and Sandeen. So I don't see it happening. So more likely a trade or something like that.
It's a fun question. How much do you think those guys would get on an offer sheet?
You just have to, I mean, in Sandeen's case, you offer sheet probably around 3, because even if the Leafs move out Hall, they still don't have enough to match the offer for Sandeen. So they'd have to move Kerfoot or something like that. So you look at that situation, and it's above what Sandeen would normally get, but you're
second round pick.
Exactly, and it's worth it at that point. For Puljujarvi, I'd go lower, and I would offer sheet him, probably just above what the Oilers don't have here, like 1.5 to 2. and
which is a third round.
And again,
pick.
It's worth it at that point. Yeah.
Like fuck, dude.
I mean, I don't know. This is why more teams should, but nobody will.
No, 100. It's 100%, right? Like, one. Okay, so two things actually piss me off right now. One, you piss me off with the Comtois Puljujarvi trade. That makes so much sense. That is such a simple. It's such a simple trade that makes so much sense for both. It gets Comtois in a new location. It gets him where he's going to have an easy opportunity to play top 6 minutes, to play with guys who can create. You know what I mean? Like it just makes a ton of sense for him. Gives him another start, but he still gets to go in to be a competitive. He's got something to prove. Yada yada yada. And then Domino is saying right now to offer sheet these two guys that Ducks are in a perfect position, especially with, like you said, what the salary points seem to be that would force the other team's hands. If that's where you're at, yeah, man, you would be more like to walk out of that draft with those two picks, because it would be Anaheim's picks. You have to trade your own picks. If they got Sandeen and Puljujarvi with their second and third round picks next year or this coming draft, that's a win. That's a clear win. This is one of those opportunities. God, I'm so annoyed right now because I never think about offer sheets because, like you said, they don't happen. It's pointless. And then when they do, they turn into the whole fucking barn thing, which was funny. Or
the situation, like somebody mentioned here, where they hate each other for a year or two after, and it's like, but it's such a smart move. Like these are the ones. It would make so much sense.
I would love to see Pat Verbeek. I mean, that is a thing where I would really love to see Pat Verbeek kind of that would be a really interesting way for him to announce himself, right? You go out, you make all these draft picks, you draft for size, you draft for defense, you very clearly have these types. You already moved out some big names the year before. They might not be big names from a league-wide perspective, but they had standing and value in Anaheim. We've seen him show no sentimentality, right? I think it was Wyshynski who tweeted this out. The reason you go outside is to pick someone to make the hard decisions, or to so you have someone who's willing to do that. Sam Steele and Sonny Milano, like those were two guys that it would be very easy, as we heard Jay say, and nothing he said didn't make sense. It would be very easy to keep those guys and justify it. It's also a fascinating thing to let those guys go and to see what you can continue to do with the roster space and the opportunity. So I'm annoyed now, actually. Like, I'm genuinely annoyed because all three of those things make entirely too much sense.
It's just a perfect position to do it. Like you said, like I would say offer sheeting Nick Hegg for a second round pick, I would probably not do. Sandeen 100%. I would offer sheet him just above, like I said, the Leafs right now, it says, according to Cap Friendly, they actually have $750K in cap space. Moving out Justin Hall gives them 2.75. So if you offer sheet him at like 3.25, 3.5, that means to even get it done, to match it, they've got to move Kerfoot, who has a modified no trade clause. They're not going to move Nylander, Marner, Tavares, and Matthews, who make the only ones who make more than Kerfoot. They just signed Calle Yarncrook. David Kampf makes 1.5. That's not going to move the needle for you. The only defensemen who make more than Justin Hall are Brody, Muzzin, and Riley. So moving Muzzin is just as hard as moving Kerfoot, and they're not going to move the goalies because they just got them in Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov. So you offer sheet Sandeen for 3.25. They need to move Hall and Kampf out the door, or they need to move Kerfoot out the door.
And you only have 3 days to match?
So.
So, it would cost them an arm and a fucking leg because everyone would know that they would be under the gun to move some of those contracts.
Yeah. And the Ducks aren't in a position where they would be worried about other teams offer sheeting any of their players, other than maybe Maxime Comtois. But you're kind of okay if you move him. You're going to sign Troy Terry and Zegras to long-term deals, so you don't have to worry about that. You're going to do the same with Jamie Drysdale. So nobody's really going to come in and like handcuff you and offer sheet somebody a ridiculous deal like Carolina and Montreal. That situation, you're not going to fall into that.
Fun fact. You can just sign those same guys that we were talking about to extensions.
That's what I mean. Yeah, you
then you don't have to.
Yeah.
No. I you know what
sign
I mean?
them before you even get to that point.
To everything that you said, even if it gets to an offer sheet point of view, those are guys Anaheim is keeping point blank. The fact that Anaheim doesn't even have to let it get to that point puts them in an incredible position to maybe be aggressive with these types of moves and maybe go piss off a team or two with these offer sheets that everybody
you're pissing
hates.
off Dubas and Ken Holland. It's not the end of the world. Like, you're not offer sheeting Yzerman or something.
What's Dubas going to do? Throw a calculator at you? It's going to be fun.
No, those would be great. I mean, if you're giving up a second-round pick for Sandeen and a third-round pick for Puljujarvi, you make those trades every day of the week. If you were to walk up to them with a second-round pick and a third-round pick, you do that. If you don't have to make your roster worth in the same point to do it, like, you add Puljujarvi.
It's a net positive in every way.
Yeah, and yeah, okay, you overpaid Sandeen a little bit. Now you give him 2 or 3 years at 3.25. You're banking on the fact that he's going to be worth that potentially even next season. And Puljujarvi, you do a 2 by whatever, a 3 by 2.5 or something. You handcuff the Oilers, and whether he ends up living up to his potential or not, he's still worth that much. He's still worth the third-round pick you gave up, and you could probably still eventually trade him for the same thing anyway and get the third-round pick back. It's a net win no matter how you approach it, other than maybe the loss of GM rep that you get by offer sheeting. But listen, it's in place for a reason. We talk about this every year. If there was ever a situation to offer sheet 2 players for what the compensation would be, this would be it. Because I can understand like the argument and maybe not wanting to offer sheet like Matthew Tkachuk because it costs you 4 first-round picks to go up to what he would want, and like you can weigh up the value again of next year's draft and whatever with that. These ones, the compensation is a no-brainer to go and do it. We could talk about this all night. We still have 3 more trades to get to. So
yeah.
Point of the matter is they should offer.
But yeah, no,
guys, for sure.
Anyways, 7 Dominoes, you suck. I'm banning you from the chat because you have now slandered
your entire
my
night
Max
is going to
Jones.
be thinking about offer sheeting Sandeen and Puljujarvi.
God, I'm so annoyed. It's such a smart idea.
All right, next one on the list is Columbus, Gustav Nyquist. So Columbus landing the big fish in Johnny Gaudreau. Now only have $2.3 million to sign RFA Patrick Laine. So they don't really have any other contracts they could move. Like, I think they want to keep Voracek, and moving $8.25 million for the next 2 years is not easy unless you're going to retain some. Nyquist makes 5.5 for just next season. That seems to be the easy domino to move. The only problem is teams are going to know you're desperate to move that off to sign Patrick Laine at this point. So you're going to have to pay, which is where Pat Verbeek and the Anaheim Ducks jump in and say, hey, we'll take on Gustav Nyquist and his full 5.5, but you're going to give us something nice to do that. I don't know what that's going to be. Jake Bean maybe, because again, they've got a lot of good young defensemen. Maybe you could get Jake Bean now. They did just sign him, I think, last year or earlier this year. Yeah,
last
so
year. They traded for him from Carolina after he didn't get taken.
Could be tough.
By,
but if you're Jake Bean as well, I mean, you don't really have a say in it. But they just drafted Jiricek, Matechuk. They have Werenski. They've got Boquist, who they just signed. Mm-hmm. Blankenberg just signed today. Like, all of a sudden, your window to being a top 4 defenseman on that team kind of shuts unless you can really take a couple steps this year. So I think you could get something good, whether it's Jake Bean or it's a top prospect from their team, a pick or something. Maybe you snag a first-round pick, maybe not next year, but a 2024 first or something like that. Because, listen, they have to move him.
Still Connor Geekie.
Yeah, but they have to. Well, Connor Geekie's in Arizona, I think. He signed in Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
They got Jiricek and Matechuk with their first 2 picks. Columbus did. Yeah.
Oh, Matechuk was who they took with 12?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Geekie went at 11 right before it. But
yeah,
getting a player that, right, and getting a pick, because in Columbus's situation, Nyquist is really the only guy they can move. That doesn't hurt their roster and makes sense, and isn't a key piece of their team. Nyquist is the guy that they can ship out. Teams are going to know that. They're going to want something good for it. And ultimately, listen, you have to, because you're going to have to sign Patrick Laine, and you have no other way of doing it.
Yeah, I want to kind of tag this on to the trade too from here, because I think they're completely interconnected. So the Gustav Nyquist, they are now in this position because they went out and got Johnny Gaudreau, which they didn't think they were going to be able to do. They pivoted, they picked him up, they brought him in, and you do that. Like, I get it. You can argue about short-sighted this or whatever, but at the end of the day, he's going to be a player that's going to help them sell tickets. And if they think they can get there quicker than not, maybe KJ is only 2 years away, a year and a half away from being a real everyday player. They've got Werenski, they've got Boquist, they've got Laine, who's already at least proven at the NHL level. Like, there's not as many question marks with that team as there are with other teams who you would think of in a similar spot. The other part of that is Sean Monahan is a guy that we have on here because Calgary has almost $19 million in cap space, but they have some big free agents. They might be able to, not have to worry too much about Mangiapane. He only had the 1 year, so they might be able to sign him on something that makes a little bit more sense. Maybe they do a 2-year bridge deal or something like that. But if there was now a team that was going to go out and get Kadri, it's that team. You lock down Matthew Tkachuk, you go get Nazem Kadri, and you just try as hard as you can to have not taken a step backwards. Nazem Kadri completely fits what Daryl Sutter is doing. And if you have Kadri and Tkachuk on each of them separately on your top two lines, you are going to draw so many penalties. You are going to draw so many penalties. I still think Jacob Markstrom's really good. I think that defense core is strong. Like, this is an interesting one where you could basically go to both teams and the same guy put him in that spot, because they needed to bring Gaudreau back just to remain at the competitive level. And if they can go out and turn him into a center, that makes a lot of sense. So then they have to move someone like Sean Monahan, who might not even play next year. His cap it's like 6.45, I think.
6.375.
Yeah, so he's a guy that it makes a lot of sense for them to move on from. And as much as they like him there, and he was a big part of it, in the mid 2010s when he was kind of him and Backlund were really the ones driving the bus and keeping that team competitive with Giordano and stuff like that. I get why it could kind of hurt a little bit, but I think they're in a position where if anyone's going to make a hard choice, it's going to be someone like them who wants to go out and get a Nazem Kadri.
And the Calgary one's a bit of a slower burn, right? It all depends there if they sign Kadri. If they sign Kadri, that's what would happen first. Then they would probably lock down Tkachuk. And then you can hold off on the Mangiapane situation for a little bit. Nobody's going to offer sheet him because it's the National Hockey League. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And then you field calls on either Sean Monahan or Milan Lucic. The only difficult thing about the Calgary situation compared to Nyquist is Monahan has a 10-team no-trade list. So if the Ducks are on that doesn't happen.
Yeah, but if he's medically done, that's my thing. They don't even know if he's going to be in a position to play next year. So you're 100% right. If it's even over 50% chance that he's medically done, you go and you ask him, and he probably says yes. If you have to, you can always put him on LTIR and just eat it for a year because he's someone you feel deserves it based on what they mean to the club. But I don't think it's ridiculous to go over to him and go, hey, man, you're done. We both know you're done. Do you care if we move your contract?
He's easier to move because of that, right? Because I think, like you mentioned to me, I think they like Lucic, and Lucic has a kind of inverse trade clause in the sense that he submits a 10-team list of teams he can go to. So there's 22 teams not on his no-trade list, essentially. So I think he's harder to move because of that. And I think the Flames like what he brings to the team. So Monahan makes sense, and you could, Calgary will really get put into a situation if and when they sign Nazem Kadri, because they should. And I think if Kadri doesn't go back to Colorado, it's to Calgary. Everybody's on this whole thing that he vetoed a trade back when he was in Toronto to Calgary. It came out that he did that because he wanted to stay in Toronto and he liked what they were building. It wasn't because he hated Calgary. And then for the Nyquist situation in Columbus, again, like there is nobody, like we said, to trade outside that. You don't want to move Borkstrand, you don't want to move Roslovic, Voracek I think they like, and you can't really move him at that cap hit for what it's going to cost you. They just signed Johnny Gaudreau, Werenski, Goodbranson at 4x4, Boquist, Gavrikov, they're all kind of staying. So I think if you could go to them and be like, listen, we'll take Nyquist and it's going to cost, Jake Bean in a pick, because Jake Bean seems to be on the inside, the outside looking in, and you do save some more cap space there with the 2.3 that Jake Bean makes, or maybe somebody in the chat said maybe you can get Alexander Techier from them. He's a younger player, 22 years old. He's had some good production there. He's a pending RFA next year. You could get him and play him in the lineup, and maybe he's a flippable asset at the deadline with that 1 year left and some control, right? So I like them as a target, an easier target, because I think Nyquist has no trade protection. Yeah, you can move him anywhere, so it does make it a bit easier for them to go after that one. The only trade we have left is probably the most exciting one, is the Colorado Avalanche. We've talked EJ before and potentially going to them and saying, listen, we'll take EJ's $6 million 1 year left contract, and you dump $6 million off. You give us, a pretty nice asset for that. New hook or something allows you to sign Nazem Kadri. The other interesting option that's emerged is Sam Girard, because
I still don't.
Now in Colorado, you've got Devon Taves McCarr, Byram, Manson, and EJ, and then whoever you want as that third pairing lefty. The downside is that, you can play Byram on that third pair right now. He's on his ELC. It's not a big deal. You're not paying a $5 million guy to play down there. But if you really think Byram's ready and you don't want to move EJ because he's a leader in the locker room, or you can't for what it's going to cost you, if it's going to cost you Newhook, you can move Sam Girard. He makes $5 for the next 5 years. Get something in return for him that's going to help your lineup.
Get a meaningful asset, too, because he's good. Let's be very clear. Sam Girard's really fucking
And you
good.
dump around $5 million in cap space for the next 5 years that allows you to bring Nazem Kadri back. I don't know if it's enough. I think it would just be enough because the Avs right now only have $3.9 million in space, so moving Sam Girard gives them $8.9. And then if you take on an asset, whatever that asset ends up making, it's going to have to be a guy with a low cap hit or on an ELC or something like that, technically, because I think Kadri, if he goes back there, 7.5, so that only leaves you about $1.5 million in cap space. But man, Sam Girard would be a fun one to bring into Anaheim. It would cost them for sure, but you can really see the fit there again with Camfell.
Well, and the thing is you would get it at somewhat of a discount for what Sam Girard would normally run you.
Yep.
Because they need to move that salary out, right? I still think, it still to me feels like Eric Johnson makes the most sense. He just got his fairy tale ending with that team. I don't know why. And Eric Johnson was really fucking good last year. Like, I was looking at his underlying numbers and he played incredibly well. Part of that is usage and team depth and all those things. But at the end of the day, like, you still have to play well. And he has done that. Sam Girard has term at $5 million. Sam Girard is worth every penny of that $5 million. And it's set. He's got, 4 years left on that deal, I think? 4 or 5 years?
This year and then 4 more.
There is no reason to me that someone as smart as Joe Sakic clearly seems to have been would move out such a term and cost-controlled asset where it provides. I mean, it would make more sense to play Byram on his offside than it would to move him or Girard.
Yeah. I don't think you even have to, because you've got Manson McCarr on the right, and then you would have still Taves.
No,
and
for
Girard,
sure. But I'm just saying, like, even if it's 2 years from now, right? Because that's really what it is. You're looking at that Byram extension. That's what your concern is. It would make more sense to drop Manson down to the third pair at that point, right? Now you've got him, and maybe it's Taves at that point, right? Maybe those guys are your third pair or something like that. And, I just think moving Sam Girard doesn't make sense to me unless they feel that they can't have – unless they feel they're going to have too many small-skilled D guys, right? Like we've talked about with, the reservations that I had as far as Matthias Havlin was concerned. Well, we've already got Jamie. We've already got Zellweger. How many 5'8" wonder kids can you have on the blue line? So maybe, I think Sam Girard's about 5'10", 5'11". So, like, maybe they can talk themselves into it that way, but it just doesn't it hasn't made sense to me from the beginning that they would move such a incredibly valuable and stable asset.
No, I don't think you ever should move him. I don't think Joe Sakic would ever actively move him. The only sense that I could see is two things. One, EJ doesn't want to go, or you value what he brings over what Girard brings because you can slot Byram up into that, second pair left-handed defense role, and you feel like you can get the same thing from him there at 900 or under $900K next year. And that's your only other option because the Avs need to bring Kadri back. They have to.
Do they have to?
Unless
Because here's
you
my
think
thing.
Newhook's ready to make the jump, they have to.
Well, not only so they just paid Nichushkin. They just paid. I think they're gonna pay, or if they haven't already, they just paid Lehkonen. McKinnon is a year away from his extension. Gabriel Landeskog's on his new deal. Like, I don't know for especially what it would cost you to A, keep him, and B, create that cap space. I don't know that you need to bring Nazem Kadri back. I understand why you would, but it feels to me like if there was any team that was going to be able to go, we're not fucking paying the 31-year-old power forward for an outlier season, it's Colorado.
There has to be some desperation there that you don't have a bona fide second line center. You just won a Stanley Cup and you're in your window to go and win as many cups as you can. This guy's proven to fit that role in your team, a proven playoff performer. Like, listen, I know Joe Sackett's not dumb, but at this point, like, I weigh up the options. Who would you rather have on that roster, Kadri or Girard? I take Nazem Kadri 10 out of 10 times on that roster.
See, I don't think I think I'd rather take Girard. Their defense is what makes that team so dynamic.
I just think it's replaceable. I think I have more faith in Bowen Byram being able to step in and do what Sam Girard does than for right now Alex Newhook to jump in and do what Nazem Kadri does. Yeah. That contract sucks. Like, whatever you sign Kadri for, 7.5, whatever. But it's not like it's gonna prevent you from signing McKinnon, because you're going to lose EJ's contract next year. It's going to come off the books no matter what. You free up $6 million. You really only need about $4 million of that to sign McKinnon to the $10 million he's probably going to make. And then you do have some extra flexibility there to add to the team and to add some depth. But then what you've got locked in there is you've got your top 6 locked in for at least the next 2 years until Rantanen's deal is up. You've got McKinnon, Landeskog, Rantanen, Kadri, Nichushkin, Lehkonen. You're good there. You've still got Alex Newhook, who eventually could take the Lehkonen spot, right, and play on that second line. Lehkonen moves down to a third line forward. You're playing him with like Comfer and whoever else you can kind of fill the roster at that point. You've got your top 2 defensemen locked in for the next few years, and Devin Taves and Cale Makar, and then you're running Byram and Manson for the next 4 years of Manson's deal, and then you just fill that bottom pairing with whatever you can get. I think it makes more sense for their roster construction to have Kadri over Girard. As much as I think Girard is an underrated player on that team, he is a key contributor to that team, but not having a bona fide second line center is what could hold that team back from going back and repeating next year. They have a better chance in my eyes of having Kadri than having Sam Girard.
Yeah, I want to look real quick and see who the center UFAs are that are available besides Patrice Bergeron. Kadri, Rask, Tierney, Beagle, Eakin, Turris, Larson, Stepan, Paquette.
It's not much.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot there, but I don't know.
I think we've gotten this far with Kadri because the Avs are trying to figure out ways to move salary. I think the fact that
I think that's probably fair.
Or again, like we'd mentioned earlier, at least the teams that are the most interested are the teams that don't have the cap space now, but are trying to do that. And I think that's Calgary. I think that's Colorado. I think that's the Islanders, potentially teams that missed out on Johnny Gaudreau, right? So,
Brad Richardson, fuck that guy.
Yeah, no, I think he ends up back in Colorado, and Sam Girard ends up getting traded out because I can't see EJ being the one, but it's one of the two. It's either EJ or Sam Girard, and
if all things are equal, would you rather have Girard or Chychrun?
Chychrun. Yeah. I'd rather have Chychrun. It's close but I think everything else that Sam Girard brings, I think Chychrun offensively is going to bring that, plus a little bit of size and a bit more of a two-way game.
I think the leap his defense took last season makes
on
him
that
a valuable
team too,
player.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
because you're the one who pointed that out to me, that like he had always been at strong underlying offensive numbers and he had been producing at a good rate for such a young defenseman. But then the team went to shit and his defense got better.
Yeah, Yeah, he took a a hit offensively because he had to focus on that, but that helps you project. Okay, he gets in a lot better team, can be a really well-rounded defenseman. A lot of those points are going to come back on the power play, right? So
yeah, it feels like he has D1 potential.
Yeah,
like
that's
D1
what I was about to say. Is he has number one defenseman potential, whereas Sam Girard, you know what he's going to be, and he's a really good player. Don't get me wrong, but he's a 3, right? He's a 3 or a 4. I don't think he's.
Well, okay, that feels a little. I think he could be a 2.
Maybe.
I don't know. I can't see the chat.
If he goes to Montreal, there's another rumored. Then he's a 2 there, right? So.
No, I get what you're saying. He's just so fucking good.
him.
I just feel like contextually he gets lost there because they've got Devin Taves, they've got Cale Makar. So 1, he's not the top left-handed D on his own team, and 2, he's not the top offensive D on his own team. Like, I do think that it kind of muddies how effective that he is.
No, 100%.
Now again, roster talent, system, clearly Bednar's a great coach, all that. So.
Well, that's it. That wraps up our trade targets, our free agent targets.
We're gonna keep it inside 4 hours this time.
We're gonna hopefully be under 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is our shortest one in a while.
Jesus.
But yeah, we got obviously a few more dominoes to drop here. Free agency is essentially cool. Like, we're waiting for Kadri and Klingberg as the final big names. We mentioned a few in Kessel and Niederreiter, Rodriguez, Subban. Like, those will be some other names that will drop. I ultimately.
And their trades that can still happen.
Like, the Ducks are going to do something. To be excited about that is they have to do something. They have to make a trade or sign somebody to go along with the RFA signings to get to the cap floor. So there's something else is going to happen. It's not like we're going to sit here for the rest of the summer and nothing's going to happen. So whether it's a ridiculous signing like Kadri or it's a few minor signings like Niederreiter and Subban or one of the trades we talked about, that it will happen. And Daniel mentions in the chat that Pagnota from the fourth period said teams linked on Kadri are the Avs, Islanders, Ducks, Kraken, and Senators. I think the Ducks and Kraken are in that, or I think specifically the Ducks are in that again because of their cap space and the perceived role that Kadri could get is similar to what he would get in Colorado. All we've heard is just the Ducks name thrown into the mix. There's no, concrete rumors other than that.
It's they're one of the few teams that can afford the contract we think he deserves after the year he had. It's literally that.
No, that's it.
And it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, and in Seattle, you could argue doesn't make any sense because now that they have fucking Shane Wright, they're going to have Shane Wright and Beniers next year, and they've already got Yanni Gourde, who is the perfect third guy to have for those two.
I'm like, it might be the fact that Anaheim checked in on his situation, and then that's interesting. Which I'm sure they probably did.
Again, I would have absolutely no problem with going to him and Klingberg and be like 1x6, 1x7, 1x4, whatever it is, right? How can we build a 1-year deal for you to put you in a good spot there you're comfortable? I have no issue with that. The problem is going to be term, and that is why these names don't make sense.
I also think if the Ducks are there in case some of these other teams can't move the cap and it doesn't work out, right? In the sense that they checked in on the situation. If he was coming to Anaheim, I think it would have happened by now. If he was Anaheim's number one choice, it would have happened by now because they have the cap space. They could have got it done already. The fact that it's taking this long is I think there are the teams at the top of his list, again, that are trying to move cap space or looking to move cap space to bring him in. If it falls down the dominoes that Anaheim is his third or fourth choice and everybody else is backed out, maybe that's how it happens, but I think that's the only way that it ends up happening.
Yeah.
We had some other stuff to get to, but it's not pressing. We can talk about it in any show. We have a development camp show that we're going to record later near the end of the month. We've got our upcoming draft review that's still in the works. We've got a tentative date set to record that for July 26th with our guest. Just waiting to get a bit closer to that date to make sure everything's good there. So that one should be one of the next shows that we do. Development camp one would come shortly after that. And then we'll see where we go from there. We've got some content we plan on doing throughout the summer, some different shows that we want to put together. So you're not going to not be hearing from us. We're going to be doing a bunch of different stuff. But those are definitely the two main shows we got coming up with the development camp show and the draft review. But thanks again. Thanks for everybody for listening after the fact. Anybody who came out to the stream. this is just the beginning of the off season. We're gonna have a bunch of other stuff that's gonna be happening here. So we're gonna be back here with a bunch of different news throughout the year. If you want to help us keep going throughout the summer, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. Search Forever Mighty. Leave us a rating, a review. We'll read it on the show. We really appreciate them. They really help us grow the show. Spotify also just released a rating system, so you can leave us a rating on Spotify. So make sure to do that if you haven't already. All video versions of the podcast, if you aren't watching this live on Twitch, they do exist on YouTube after the fact. So you can go to youtube.com/forevermightypodcast. Make sure to subscribe there. We also put out occasionally some morning shows called Ducks Morning Brew, where I hop on there and cover some topics. It's a little bit harder in the summer with the kid home, but we do put out some extra content there. So if you want to check out the video versions of this podcast and some other stuff, make sure to check out our YouTube. Check out our website, forevermighty.com. You can find everything in one place there, where to watch, listen to the show, how to support the show, where to find us on social media. Speaking of social media, you can find us on Twitter at ForeverMightyFM. Jason, who was on the show before, is at Jason_Lamb. I'm at Eddie Van Jones, and Steven is at The Hockey Boomer. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Thanks to everybody who joined the stream. We've got new emotes, new sub badges in the stream, so if you haven't come out to the stream, make sure to follow us on Twitch and get out here. And we will see you guys later.
Bye, everybody.